BRICKYARD live show, whether you're listening to us on Spotify after the fact or whatever you consume your podcast, or you're watching us live on YouTube or after the fact. We appreciate you tuning in, giving us some time out of your day where we all come together for something we love, which is football, which is crazy because it's already halfway through the season. The NBA is going right now. We're at the time where the World Series is going on. Hockey is back, so you're kind of at the pinnacle of sports right now. And we've had 8 weeks so far, and we're about to get into November football, which is where I make all of my money because that's where your takes and my takes come into effect and start playing out when we see the big picture and don't get caught up in hot take culture. And then we also have teams that need to be graded. How well did these teams actually do? Most people don't cover all 32 teams or pay attention or keep up with it, but you give us 3.5 hours out of your week, you're going to know what's going on in the entire NFL. So we'll let you know what happened and grade every single team this year. You'll get my grade and get his grade for some variety. But the playoffs, with it being halfway into it, like, let's take a midseason preview at what the playoff picture could look like and how do we see that changing as the season goes on?
Yeah, so we'll go over the previews eventually, but we're going to talk about playoff picture right now, get into the grades later. So in the AFC, as of right now, the number one seed is obviously the Kansas City Chiefs. Arrowhead Invitational looking more than likely. First matchup as of right now, the 2 seed and 7th seed would be the Houston Texans and the LA Chargers. Chargers sit there at the 7th seed. Right behind them is the Indianapolis Colts and the Bengals not too far out.
Wow, yeah, I could. It depends on how banged up the Texans are, but I could see that being an underrated game here. I couldn't pick the Chargers to win just because of the Texans here, but I think that could be a closer game, and they can give the Texans a little bit of a scare. But at the end of the day, they're still the Chargers. It's still Justin Herbert, so I can't see them pulling through. But that's a great matchup for both teams.
Yeah, I think I'd put the Texans to win that too, even without Stephon Diggs. But um, what I'm interested to know is like if the Chargers are going to keep that playoff seeding because behind them you see really the only teams that are worth mentioning. I think we can safely put the Titans, the Jets, the Patriots, the Jags, and the Raiders out of playoffs. And honestly, the Browns are probably in the same boat. But Jameis, I'm not going to bank Jameis out quite yet. But Dolphins, Bengals, Colts, and Chargers are all fighting for that 7th seed as of right now. Do you see the Chargers still making the playoffs, or can you see someone like the Bengals or Colts take over their crown?
Um, the Colts and the Bengals for sure. I just think the Bengals have so much experience. It'll be tough for them to climb out of the AFC North, but a team like the Colts has an easier division. Could see them coming up. I could even see a team like the Broncos being in the mix for that 7 seed with how they've looked against mediocre teams over the past few weeks. So I think it's definitely up for grabs, and by no means it's a lock for the Chargers. You still have a lot to prove with this team.
Yeah, I think right now, Chargers, I see them still staying at that 7th seed. We'll see how it is with Joe Flacco with the Colts. I do think he's going to make them better. Dolphins, I think, have too much ground to make up. And the Bengals, I just don't think it's their year right now. I think they missed the playoffs. So in that situation, we'd have the Texans. And then this is probably my favorite matchup in the AFC right now. We have Steelers and Ravens, 3 and 6 seed. This would be the matchup of the week in the AFC for sure. Right now, I'd have to pick the Ravens by an edge, but I definitely think this is going to be like a 27-24 kind of game. Super great defensive performance. And I honestly think the Steelers could beat them, but I'll pick the Ravens just because of the wagon that they are.
Yeah, I would. I don't know. It depends on how dynamic Deontay Johnson is and how much of a difference it makes. But they is an interesting matchup because they play each other later in the season. Like it's pretty late in the year, and one of these teams is gonna take the division this year. We can guarantee. And if it's a matchup, like what does it come down to? It comes down to veteran leadership and experience here. So you have experience with Mike Tomlin, but at the quarterback position, who has more playoff experience, Russell Wilson or Lamar Jackson? So like you have to look at Russ as someone who's been there, he's done it before, he's won a Super Bowl in the Steelers defense. If they're healthy at the end of the year in the playoffs, they'll have another gear to go to. So I think this would be the worst case scenario for the Ravens is playing the Steelers in the first round.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to face the Steelers if I'm any of those teams in the wild card. I'd try to avoid them at all cost. And then as of right now, the fourth and fifth seed matchup would be the Bills and Broncos. Broncos, I don't know, are going to stay in the fifth seed. I feel like you're probably going to see the Ravens jump to the five seed eventually. But Broncos and Bills, I think I'd have to pick the Bills here. I just think the Broncos just aren't dynamic enough offensively. Defense has been really solid, but I just think the Bills, Josh Allen in the playoffs has shown to perform outside of the big three. But I think that yeah, Bills and Broncos, that would be probably my least favorite matchup of these three that we've gone over.
Yeah, it's just one of those matchups that's going to be kind of blah. It'll be like a close first half, and then suddenly the Bills will turn it up, and Josh Allen has 4 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, and it's 40-17.
Yeah,
Like these are
at,
the teams that the Bills prey on.
yeah. As of right now, I feel like the division winners are all but locked in outside of the Steelers and the AFC North, but that one could obviously fluctuate. But for wild cards, I feel like it's going to be either the Ravens and Steelers at one, and then Broncos will probably make it, and then Chargers or Colts, I think, are going to be 6 or 7, if I were to guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Colts Texans, like the Colts lost to them twice this year by one possession. It is really hard to beat a divisional team 3 times in a season, especially when you played that close and it was a split decision last year. Like if it's still Flackenheimer and he's starting this week because Anthony Richardson's too tired to play football right now, and you have Stephon Diggs who's out. You've had a weak offensive line, and Nico Collins has been banged up, and Joe Mixon's health has been a question. Like that is not a good matchup for the Texans at all. Like you get terrified, but it's great for the NFL if we have Colts, Texans, and then we have Steelers and Ravens in the first round of the playoffs. Like that is great for the NFL, and then the Bills get a layup.
Yeah, the Bills get a win. That'll be fun to watch. And I think if this all plays out the way we think it would, we would see something like potentially the Ravens going to Kansas City for the first matchup. Maybe we'd see the Chargers if they pull out a win. But interesting to see how it shakes out. Then if we move over to the NFC, first round bye goes to Ford Field and the Detroit Lions. Taking a week off. And then as of right now, it would be the Commanders and Eagles with the 2 and 7th seed, respectively. How do you think that game shakes out?
The Commanders and the Eagles.
Yeah.
I think the Commanders win that for sure. I think the Commanders this season they've had some games where they've had to go through some growing pains, but the Eagles just don't seem like they have it right now, and their health has been very questionable. I know you got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith back, and Saquon Barkley has been fairly healthy for you, but just right now, I think the Commanders have more to play for, more to prove, and all of the pressure is going to be on Philadelphia. Commanders aren't supposed to be here, which is this could be a do or die game for Nick Sirianni. It is a reputational game for Jalen Hurts here. So it's like, okay, there's a lot of jobs that could be lost and a lot of pressure on Philly where the Commanders are happy to be here and they're well aware of that. So Dan Quinn would love nothing than to blow the Eagles up.
Yeah, and we saw what they did last year against the Bucks. Like, wasn't very pretty. So I think I could see that happening too. And then great matchup again. We got Falcons and Vikings right now for the 3 and 6 seed. Potentially a revenge game for Kirk Cousins, or vice versa, revenge for the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. That could be a great matchup.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a really good matchup. Right now, I would take the Falcons here. I mean, the Vikings were ready to move on from Kirk Cousins, and I think it was mutual, no bad blood there, but I just think the Falcons defense will be able to give Sam Darnold a lot more problems than Kirk Cousins because he knows what this defense is. He's played up against it in every week in practice. So I think the Falcons would definitely have the edge here, especially being at home. And I just don't think Darnold is someone who's going to go out there and get it done in a playoff game. It was a nice first 5-0 start, but we're starting to see if you have a quarterback who's going to outplay him, then you're probably going to lose.
And then for the last matchup, as of right now, if the playoffs ended today, funny enough, we'd have Cardinals and Packers as of right now. I don't even think we need to go over who would win this game. I think the Packers, I don't know if they'd go Cowboys on them like they did last year, but they would at least easily cruise to a win. Packers are a much better team than the Cardinals, which interestingly enough, AFC it seems like we're already down to like 9 teams that are in contention, but here like we go 13 deep
Every
of
team.
teams. The only teams that are out of it are the Panthers, the Giants, and the Saints as of right now, but Cowboys, Rams are both 3 and 4. Seahawks, 49ers, Bucks, and Bears all have 4 wins respectively. And then the 7th seed is the Eagles with 5 and 2. I think matchup wise, you could probably see the Cardinals fall out of that division lead pretty quickly. I think the Rams are probably going to take that. Rams and Packers would be a lot better of a matchup, or Packers and 49ers. That's a classic matchup. I just don't see the Cardinals making the playoffs. I just don't. Not yet. Maybe next year, but not this year.
Yeah, and I think the Rams win that division currently.
Yeah, I agree. So Rams and Packers, still a fun game. I still think the Packers win. And then for wild card seeding, I think the Packers are pretty much locked into that 5 seed, maybe 6 seed. Um, do you see the Vikings staying in playoffs or potentially slipping out?
Um, I think they're good enough and have enough firepower and have played passable enough football where they're still better than most of these other teams in the NFC still, despite their flaws being exposed here. But I don't think they're a bad team, and I don't think they're a poorly coached team. I really like Kevin O'Connell on this team. So I think for them, they may slip to the 7 seed and have some rough ones here, but I think they will recoup, regather, and then make another playoff push because I think every team in that division currently is going to be in the playoffs. That's just my prediction. So I think the Lions, Bears, Packers, and Vikings are all going to be there. And I expect the Bears to be at that 6 seed, and I expect the Vikings to be at the 7.
Okay. So if that all played out, I see like if the NFL plays it the way they'd want to, I see a Commanders and Bears matchup, a Falcons and Vikings, and then um, Packers and maybe the 49ers or Packers and Rams. Feel like
Packers
those are
and
the
Rams would
matchups.
be a great game, especially
I,
offensively.
I feel like that's a matchup that the NFL is going to want to push for, just for all the narratives and whatnot. Typically, it usually balances out that way. But teams that are out of the mix that could make it, right on their tails is the Bears, who we have in the playoffs. The Bucks, you lose Chris Godwin and Mike Evans is banged up. Maybe they don't make the playoffs this year, unless if they pass the Falcons, which I don't know if they do. And then really, it's just all of the NFC West teams that are still in the mix, who are all 4 and 4, pretty much.
It's crazy. No, the NFC West is a crazy place, and what a great place to start grading teams here because we had a lot of these teams start out really good, or the Rams struggled with some injuries here, and people thought they could be out of it. But I thought if Nakua and Cooper Cup come back soon enough, they can make a push here. Then the Cardinals just sit atop the division. Do you want to start at the top of this division or the bottom for
Sure.
teams we're going to go over?
Let's start at the top. So last time we talked about how quarterly grades, the Cardinals were 1 and 3. They just got killed by the Commanders. They were 1 and 3. And then since then, they beat the 49ers, got crushed by the Packers, beat the Chargers in an ugly Monday night game, and then they edged out a win against the Dolphins. So they're 3 and 1 in the last 4. If I had to give a grade for them right now, I'd give them a B minus, simply because they're pretty average. I don't have high expectations for them moving forward this year. I think they have enough potential next year, but I just don't think it's their year yet. I see them ultimately finishing 7 and 10, 8 and 9, and missing out on the playoffs, but playing competitive football nonetheless.
Yeah, I can see that. And for the Cardinals, it's just too many blowout losses here. And you kind of have to look at the wins they had. Like, sure, you beat the Chargers, but I don't think there's anything really spectacular about beating the Chargers. We had two teams face off that don't have fans. Like, okay,
Yep.
that's cool. And the home team with the one fan there won the game. It's like, great, you both had a fan in the stands watching you. That's why tickets are like $10 to see the Cardinals and the Chargers. And then you beat Miami. It's Tua's first game back. Have to get into a shootout with them, but Miami's defense really hasn't been impressive this year. Beat the Niners. Why did you beat the Niners, you may ask? Well, what happened in that game? The kicker died on the field, and then the Niners would have won that game if they could just kick extra points, and boom, the game is over if they have a kicker here. You can't kick a game winning field goal. You can't kick an extra point, and you only win by one. You only beat the Chargers by two, even though that was a pretty pathetic game from the Chargers. And then you only beat the Dolphins by one, and it's Tua's first game back after getting a brutal head injury. So it's like their wins for me aren't that impressive. You're 4-4, and for me, you already beat the Rams once, but if you want to win the division, you have to create some separation. So you didn't do that enough, and now Nakua and Cooper Cup are back. So like, I see you right now at a C for me. It's like you're competent, but I can't give you a competent plus right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, also, it's funny enough, of all the teams that are leading their division, they have the lowest points differential with negative 27.
Boom, roasted. A
Yeah, so
negative point differential. How crazy is that? That's insane. Negative 27 points. I mean, this is worse than the Kirk Cousins led Vikings. This is worse than the Daniel Jones team that made the playoffs. Like, absolutely insane stuff here. Because when they do lose,
they get
it
killed
is a bloodbath. But when you win, it's like
a field goal.
painful. Painful.
Yeah, it's a yeah, that Cardinals and Chargers game was hideous. And I know that the mom in Mesa, who was the one singular Cardinals fan, she was loving that game. She was so happy. But for that one Chargers fan in New Hampshire, wasn't so happy. We've seen him on the show before. But yeah, I just don't see it happening. In fact, actually, that whole division, the 49ers are the only ones with a plus differential uh, above zero. So Cardinals, I'm giving them a B minus simply because they have potential, but I just don't think this is their year quite yet. They have won some games against teams that are, playoff teams for sure, but just not their year. I don't believe in them fully.
Yeah, and then we have the 49ers here who we saw them go out there, blow out the Patriots at the end of last quarter, and then you lose again to the Cardinals without a kicker. Then you play Seattle and you dominate them. And the 49ers have pretty much dominated Seattle the past few years here, but you went out there, stomped out a divisional opponent, never easier to do. And then suddenly Brock Purdy goes to Kansas City, and everyone thinks he forgot how to play football. You only score 18 points, but then you get a nice dominant win versus the Cowboys, who have shown that they've been able to be had this season. And honestly, I have to give them an I or an E, because this is exactly what I expected from the 49ers this season, where they're going to be banged up here. They were going to get in some tough games, but I just don't think they'll have enough juice at the end of the season to really cap off the division here against the Rams.
Yeah, see the 49ers, right? Whether it's Brandon Ayuk that's out for the season, Christian McCaffrey, whose legs just might be completely detached from his body by season's end, or all the other injuries that piled up, I can't give them a grade, so I'm going to give them an emoji. I'm giving them a band-aid. So I think they need it right now
Emoji.
with how bad their injuries have been. I just feel like that's the only appropriate grade I can give them. B for Band-Aid, or O for ouch, or whatever you want to use for it. IR maybe is the grade I'd give them. But they need a Band-Aid. They need some voodoo magic because that curse of the Super Bowl hangover, that curse of the Madden curse, the curse of just apparently just the team that loses the Super Bowl, they need a Band-Aid because their team has fallen apart, and I feel like it's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah. How long did it take you to draw that, by the way?
About 10 seconds.
Really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
That's a good band-aid. All right. I thought it looked like a airplane propeller, but
I mean, it was blurry on my end, so I assume it was good, but
good
you
enough.
came through in the clutch. Speaking of a team that doesn't come through in the clutch when you need them, the Seahawks, we saw them absolutely die Last time we were here on national television versus the Lions, and then they get embarrassed at home versus the Giants. The most points that the Giants have scored all season. And we've been hearing about Reek Woolen, and we've been hearing about all of these great corners. Devon Witherspoon for the Seattle Seahawks, Boye Mafe, and you have a defensive head coach, but the defense is getting worse every single week because not only did you allow Daniel Jones to score the most amount of points that the Giants have scored all season, maybe the most points he's ever put up in his career. Don't fact check me on that. I just want to believe it's true. And then the 49ers get 36 on you. And then you go to Atlanta. They're kind of looking forward to the next week. Then you go back home and you get absolutely broken by the Buffalo Bills. And I know this is usually a passing score, a B, but I have to give them a B, but not for what you think. It'll be a B for broken. This team looked like they got broken at home by the Buffalo Bills. Geno Smith is saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on versus Buffalo. DK having him calm him down now that he's injured. Like the Rams are coming back and getting healthy, and then you had a chance to make a statement at home versus Buffalo, and they just walk all over you when they've shown that they can be had this season. And at some point when you start 3-0, but you get worse throughout the season, like your defense is a main unit you can look at. Like what is happening with this team? So I think we need to see like what's happening with Mike McDonald because the defense wasn't this bad last year.
No, their defense was not bad last year. And they have the pieces in place, as you mentioned. For me, I'm going to give them a D, but not because I think that they're failing, but I think decline is the right word. We've seen teams start 3 and 0 and end up being fraudulent. The Sam Darnold Carolina Panthers come to mind. And there's a number of other teams over the last few years that have done that. But you start off 3 0, and since then, you've lost four of the last five. Your schedule does not get any easier as you face your division 4 of the 5 next weeks. And I feel like all those other teams are in a better position than you are at this point. Even with the Niners being banged up, I still feel like they're in a better position. So, yeah, I don't see what the Seahawks are doing at this point. Geno Smith was a great story the first time around, the first year, but each year it's slowly declined over time. This year, it's time for you to get a quarterback that you can build a future around. Geno Smith is 32 years old. Go out and get a quarterback that isn't in his 30s, and I think maybe you'll have a brighter future. But right now, it's D for decline because you started off so hot, but now it's like you're not winning your division.
Yeah, no, you're not winning your division, and the reason why is because the Rams here. So last time we saw the Rams, they got a tough, gritty win versus the San Francisco 49ers, and then you go to Chicago, and it's a tough defensive battle. Chicago hasn't lost in Chicago. They've been very good at home, and you don't have your two best weapons on offense here. And then you go to Green Bay and play a tough one, but Green Bay is simply just a better team than you, similar to Chicago. But then you beat the Raiders in a close game, and then you get your two weapons back, and you beat a 5-1 team in the Minnesota Vikings, one of the hottest teams to start the year on Thursday Night Football. Get everyone healthy, and now you can go out there versus Seattle and get a huge, big win. Like I give this team a B plus plus for businesses booming right now. You go 2-2, you stay alive, but you stayed within striking distance at the top of your division.
Yeah, I think that's a good grade. I'm going to give them a B, highest grade of anybody in the NFC West currently. I think all the games that they've lost outside of the Cardinals game are against teams that are going to be in the playoffs at the end of it, or at least be in the mix. You lost to 3 NFC North team, which is the best division in football currently. You beat the Vikings, who are undefeated, and then had some gritty wins against the Niners and Raiders. And then looking forward, you face the Seahawks still, you face the Cardinals again, you face the 49ers again, and then you have games like the Dolphins and Patriots and Saints, and all games that you should win. By the end of this, I think they should be at top of that division, probably looking at a lot like around 11-6 if I were to guess, as everyone starts to come into formation. So I like where they're at, and I think they're going to win their division.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's shift over to the other West here. And I want to start from the bottom to just get this team out of the way. But one of the most, I don't know, we didn't expect this team to be amazing, but I still feel like they've been a disappointment this year, and that's the Raiders. Um, you get blown out by the Broncos, and then we see them get destroyed by the Steelers, and Justin Fields didn't even have a spectacular performance throwing the ball there. And then you lose a close game versus the Rams, where you're never really in control, and lose a close game against the Chiefs, where you're never really in control. And then it gets, I guess, a little bit easier going forward, where you play the Bengals, Dolphins, Broncos, and then Chiefs. So some winnable games, but just another disappointing team. So D minus for disappointing.
I'm going to steal your grade. I think if the Raiders were smart, which the last 20 years, not necessarily their MO, but just lose the rest of your games. You're in a position where you can get the number one overall pick. You can get off of someone like Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. What this team needs is a quarterback, and if they want to get someone like a Shador Sanders, I think you should just lose out. Honestly, be 2-15. This is a formation year. If you can start playing competitive but still lose, then I feel like you're going to be in a better spot next year. You can go and get the top quarterback prospect. But right now, like you have a decent weapon in Brock Bowers. You know, Jacoby Myers is a fine receiver, but at this point, just lose. So I'm going to say I'm going to give him a T for just start tanking. Honestly, just suck. Be 2-15, and then next year, if you want to keep Antonio Pierce, by all means, do that. But just tank so you can get your future quarterback because you guys have not had a future quarterback since Derek Carr left the building a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and even him, it's like we like Derek Carr more than most people, but he's still not that franchise guy unless you have everything that's going to go right for you. So definitely a tough situation, but I think losing right now is the right thing. And then another team that they can't decide if winning or losing is the right thing right now. We have the Chargers in that division working our way up in the NFC West. You go out there, have a tough game versus the Chiefs, only score 10 points, ends up being a gritty 10-17 game. And then you beat the Broncos, but you give your fans a heart attack while you're doing it. I mean, people on the couch who, like, oh, I've seen this story 1,000 times before with this team where they almost blow a lead, and usually they end up blowing it, but I guess they won. And then you break your fans' heart by losing to the Cardinals. And then you go out there and you beat the equivalent of a WNFL team.
Yep. Yeah, honestly, for me, I have to give them a C because they have just been the epitome of average all season. Yeah, they're going to beat up on the Panthers and they're going to beat up on the Raiders and even the Broncos and the Saints, two teams that aren't overly competitive outside of the Broncos. It's like I feel like they're beating the teams that they should beat and they're losing to teams that they should lose to. Their defense has looked really nice, and I feel like they have enough potential on offense that next year will look good for them. But this year, I just see 8 and 9 in their story, and their schedule does get tough down the stretch. So, give them a C for Chargers and just average and just overall just mid. That's what the Chargers
Yeah,
are.
I'll do a C half minus for competent ish.
Yeah, competent ish. Like Lad McConkey played a really good game last week,
Oh yeah, you
and
love him.
yeah, he's been a hit for them. Like he's excelled for them. J.K. Dobbins was a nice addition for him, but ultimately, I feel like their highlight this year has been their defense, and I mean that's good. That's what Jim Harbaugh brings, but again, I just don't see them making the playoffs at the end of it, and if they do, I just don't see them going anywhere in the playoffs either.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be tough. I don't think they win a playoff game here, so I think that's pretty safe to say, especially for the Chargers. But a team ahead of them that has surprised some people added a veteran quarterback this offseason. They're like, we need someone who's a rookie who's not going to cost a lot of money to play, but a veteran at heart because he's 40 years old. And the Broncos went out there and got the 40-year-old veteran, Bo Nix. And from what we've seen from them, I mean, it's been hit or miss, but they've dominated bad teams and they've made sure they put them away. Where you go out there, beat the Raiders 34-18, not really a contest. You almost come back, versus the Chargers in that game, and then you bury the Saints on Thursday Night Football, and you cover the largest spread of the NFL, 11 points that was put on you. Usually the refs will try and help you cover that game, but you win 28 to 14 against Carolina, and the honestly the Broncos have been a surprising team where it's like I think they're fine. I think they're passable, and I do think they're going to beat all of the teams that they should, and if there's a better team, they may win one of those games, but they'll lose most of them. So I'll give them honestly, they deserve a B minus for the season so far because you're the fifth seed in the AFC. No one expected you to be here. You're dealing with the Russell Wilson situation, and suddenly now Bo Nix is 7-1 in October with touchdowns to interceptions, and he's starting to open it up a little bit. He can move kind of, so if he can just be like a tame Will Levis for this team, Broncos could be pretty great because their defense has shown at times that the same one from the past few years, it's still in there somewhere. And it could come out in a playoff game when a team like either the Bills or the Ravens are not expecting it and get blindsided.
Yeah. Broncos, just because I was expecting them to be so bad this year. I didn't have high expectations. I thought their defense was going to be good, but their offense, I wasn't overly overwhelmed with the Cortland Suttons of the world, the Javante Williams, and I definitely was not impressed with Bo Nix coming out of the draft, but they've surprised me enough where I think that they can make the playoffs even with their upcoming schedule. They face the Ravens and Chiefs up next, but I'm going to give them a B minus as well, simply because I think these next few weeks are going to be really telling. So when we do our third quarter grades, that's when I'll fully be able to fully assess them. But right now, I've been really impressed with what I've seen from them so far. So I like where they're headed, and I think they should be in the mix for the playoffs at the end of it.
Yeah, and honestly, in the third quarter, I think they can go 2-2 because you play the Ravens, the Chiefs, and but you get the Falcons at home. That's a game I can see the Falcons losing to you. And then you play the Raiders. And then after that, you have the Browns, you have the Colts. We don't know where the Colts are going to be. Chargers. And then you probably won't beat the Bengals because they're going to be probably vying for the seventh spot. And then the Chiefs the last week, who may be resting everybody and has already locked up the one seed. So I could see this team finishing on a strong note as well. And if they make the playoffs, that's an A season for them.
Oh, for sure. And then the Chiefs. I mean, what is there to say? Even with Patrick Mahomes not playing his best football, even with all the injuries, they're still 7-0. And I look at their schedule coming up, like Tampa on Monday night. Looks like they're going to win that game. Denver, they're probably going to win that game. Buffalo, we'll see. But Carolina, like the next four games, they realistically could go 11-0 to start, and then they face the Raiders. So I don't know where they see the next loss. Maybe Buffalo, but other than that, like this is a team that could finish 14-3, 15-2, maybe undefeated. I don't know, but they got D Hop as well, so I can only give them an A plus simply because they're the only undefeated team left, and they've been aggressive trading for Josh Uche, which is a big addition for them, and getting D Hop going all in. So yeah, A plus for the Chiefs.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to give them an H for hey you muppets talking online and in the media like this, oh my god, it's time to panic about the Chiefs, or is this the season that the Chiefs are finally going to fall off even though they're 6-0 and the only team to do it. It hasn't been the most impressive 6-0 I've ever seen. Like, okay. No, the Chiefs don't need to prove anything to us in the regular season by, I don't know, winning every single game. And they may be the first team to three-peat here. And really, what matters is the defense. Patrick Mahomes will make enough plays in the playoffs. And now you go out there and get DeAndre Hopkins. It's like the Chiefs don't need to prove to themselves, like the Lions do, that they can go out there and blow out other NFL teams because it's what they do in the playoffs. And Patrick Mahomes has been there. He's thrown for 50 touchdown seasons. Like, he doesn't need to dominate every single team he plays. Like, we've compared
No,
them to the Patriots, and it's very Patriots esque how this franchise is run. We're bringing in an older star who has something to prove, like DeAndre Hopkins. Now, we're bringing back players like Juju, who we can just plug and play on our team. We drafted a player like Xavier Worthy. We can fill in enough on the run game, and we have our old reliable tight end here. Like, hey, you Muppets, just stop. It's
this is gonna be
enough. It's the stupidest take.
what I'm excited for. I'm looking at the rest of their schedule. They have 10 games left, right? And the losses that I could see potentially is like maybe the Steelers on Christmas, maybe the Bills in week 11. But other than that, like I don't maybe the Texans week 16, but this is a team that I think could go 17 and 0 for sure. It's just with how great their defense is. If Patrick Mahomes plays like Patrick Mahomes and he elevates his game even more, then who's going to beat the Chiefs? And I feel like what we're going to see is they're going to go 17 and 0 and they're going to go, is this the worst undefeated team we've ever seen? Like that's going to be the
Yeah.
new argument. It's like they're 7 and 0 and I don't see a loss on their schedule for the next month. And if they even lose to the Bills is the question. Like I don't see another loss in there pretty much at all.
Yeah. I mean, the stick girl offended me because she was on camera. Oh no, I'm so offended. They showed Taylor Swift. It's crazy. No, I think with this team, they'll be fine going into the playoffs. Now, will they have enough firepower and can they be got in the playoffs? Like, yeah, but it's hard to get to the conference championship. And I think the thing to think about for people is at worst, the Chiefs are going to be probably 14-3, but the next best team is probably going to be 12-5
Yeah.
realistically. Texans now have some injuries building up. The Ravens are going to lose some games in division. Pittsburgh is for damn sure going to win some games. Like maybe some team goes 13-4, but the Chiefs will probably have the tiebreaker over them because if it's a must-win game and they is a realistic chance that they need to beat the Steelers on Christmas, like I have no doubt that they'll go out there and compete versus the Steelers and beat them if they need
Yeah.
to.
Plus, they're already 2 games ahead of every other team. And these are teams like the Bills, who I think are going to lose more games, the Steelers, the Texans, and everybody else that could go in their path. I feel like they're probably still going to have a 2 game lead at worst. And that's if they
Yeah,
lose a game this year.
and then you're gonna look up after the bye, and they're gonna have Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, and then I know Pacheco has the chance to come back, or Rasheed Rice does. One of them.
Yeah. If they get Rashid Rice and Pacheco back,
Yeah, I
good
think
luck.
Rasheed Rice is done for the year, but I think Pacheco could potentially come back, or you can like fill in that position. But that's gonna be a tough team to
They
deal
have.
with. That's a fast trio.
The thing is they've already filled in for Pacheco. Pacheco is obviously a great player, but Kareem Hunt has filled in really nicely for him. Carson Steele, who they just picked up out of nowhere, just some random kid from the Midwest, and he
Stud
balled
off
when he
the
came.
street.
Yeah, pretty much. And then yeah, like the receiver core is good enough now, especially with D Hop and then Hollywood coming back. So yeah, I mean, they're a lock for the 1 seed at this point. I think.
Yeah, no, they're luck. What we went to the west first. Where do you feel like going? Do you feel like going south, north, east?
Let's go north because both north divisions are just loaded. We can stay in the AFC if we want, or go to NFC. I'll let you decide where to start.
Let's stay in the NFC. We'll do
We
the
stay in the
weave.
NFC. Okay. We'll weave around here. Let's start at the bottom and then get here. Bottom of the division currently is Chicago. What have they done since we last talked to them? They beat up on the Panthers as they should. They beat up on the Jags as they should in London. Had a bye week, which they did win, I heard. And then in Washington, a game that they could have easily won if it wasn't for somebody taunting the Washington fans. Hail Mary by Jaden Daniels to win it. But so far, I mean, I feel like they are starting to come into gear. Caleb Williams didn't play a great game last week, but it does feel like he is starting to get his legs under him a little bit. So for them, I still it's hard for me to fully embrace them currently, but their defense is really good. I think Caleb is going to only get better, and then the weapons around them are obviously good. So right now, I'm going to give them a B minus simply because there are games there that they should have won that they did not, and this game against Washington is still stale in my mouth. So I'll give them a B minus for now.
Yeah, I think with this team, it's tough, but this is a team that has been the same old Bears over the past few years, has started slow, and there's been a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams. And I feel like people will grade the Bears season solely on Caleb Williams, but this is a situation where this is also the team around him. What is the defense doing this season? How well have they performed as a unit? And when you look at the Bears defense, you hold the Rams to 18 points, who really haven't been able to pin them down that well. And then the Panthers you hold to 10 points. I mean, that's pretty impressive. The Jaguars you hold to 16, which is looking pretty impressive this week. And then you hold the Commanders, who are at 1 point the highest scoring offense in the NFL, to 18 points, and you still lose that game because of the offense. But overall, I think they deserve a A-, especially for the division you're playing in, where you've set yourself up for right now. You go 3-1 in October, like that's as good as you can expect for the Chicago Bears is 3-1. Now, do you get an A and an A plus where you went over the top and you dominated the Commanders in a game where you really needed? No, but I do think that the Commanders are also a really good team, and if you played them at home, I think you win that game. So I think you're afforded a loss, especially coming off a game where you're coming off a bye there. So I think the Bears have still exceeded expectations a little bit because 3-3 is still impressive for a young team being led by a rookie.
Yeah, they've been good. DeAndre Swift also has started to come into his own. Struggled in the first quarter of the season, but now he's starting to get his legs under him. And then Cole Kmet has been a luxury as always. So I think for now, I want to see them really start to see Caleb take that next step, which I think he is capable of. We've seen it a little bit, but I want to see him do it against better teams. Next week they face the Cardinals, Patriots, and then when it comes to those division games, right now we still have faced the Packers twice, we faced the Vikings twice, and the Lions twice. How will they face in their division? Then that's when I'll feel pretty good. So next quarter we'll start to see that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that'll be a tough quarter for them. So I'm excited to see how the Bears progress. But you can only play who's been put in front of you so far.
True. And then after that, we have the Vikings, who at one point was undefeated. They beat up on the Giants, the Niners, the Texans, the Packers, the Jets. And then these last 2 weeks, they lose to the Lions and Rams, who we both have in the playoffs. Lions are currently the 1 seed, and the Rams we have winning the division. Not necessarily bad losses, but we are starting to see them come down to earth. We gave them an A last quarter, but with them starting to come back down to earth a little bit, we saw the London game as well, where just kind of saw Sam Darnold kind of regress a little bit, but I still think they're having a good season. I still think that they're a playoff team. I'm going to give them a B because I think overall, still a good team, still good defensively, still great weapons on offense. So, how far can Sam Darnold take you is the real question.
Yeah, and it's probably not very far. He can take you to the playoffs, but is he going to go out there and go above and beyond? No, I don't think so. But you're getting your tight end back here, so that's going to be a huge boost for you. Where he'll have another reliable target. Justin Jefferson has played well this season. Aaron Jones has been the weakness, and he's been the one that's been able to resolve we had Chuba Hubbard, Alexander Madsen. We had to get rid of Dalvin Cook. So he's really been that piece they've been looking for on offense. But I do think like you still have to put it in a context where this is a team that is supposed to be rebuilding, had JJ McCarthy drafted, and then we found out the kid from the Sixth Sense is starting the season who is seeing ghost here. So I think putting it in a context like this is still Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold has never really looked like a competent quarterback outside of September, and he's still playing efficient football. He's turning it over, but it's not egregious where you can live with the interception here and there. So I think he's still done a good job on that team, and they're a bad face mask call away from beating the Rams. So I think, with that being said, you gave the Lions everything you had and came close. So I'll still give you a B plus for the Vikings this season. You're still exceeding expectations for what they were coming into the year, which was supposed to be the worst team by far in the division, and no plan at quarterback. JJ McCarthy gets hurt.
Yeah, and they've played really well. They've exceeded expectations. Then the Packers. So the Packers, when we last talked about their quarterly grades, they were 4-0. Malik Willis led the charge for them when it mattered, with Jordan Love falling hurt. And then Jordan Love comes back, and they have won 4 straight games. They beat the Rams, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Texans, and then they beat the Jags as well. Jordan Love did get banged up this last game, but it looks like he is good to go against the Lions this week. But overall, I mean, given the fact that Jordan Love got banged up twice and Malik Willis stepped in and looked great, happened again last week, I have to give the Packers an A minus currently, simply because with all the injuries, you lose your star quarterback, and Malik Willis steps in and looks exceptional for a guy that did not look exceptional in Tennessee. I got to give them a good grade there. I think Matt LaFleur is an early Coach of the Year candidate for sure. So I'm giving them an A minus. I think that they're going to give some hell to Detroit, and maybe they split with Detroit. We'll see, but I think that they're going to be a wagon and a lock in for that fifth wild card.
Yeah, I mean, what a great game on Sunday, right? All the chips pushed to the table for both of these teams, both of them dealing with some injuries, and Jordan Love and Aiden Hutchinson. But you went out there and you did what's expected of you. You won every single game in October, and not only what's expected for you, but you exceeded expectations. And not only did you do that, you do it in the most entertaining way possible, where the Packers, you'll never find them in a boring game here. Maybe one you could point to is the Rams, where it got a little bit muddy at times, but it was still very entertaining. But yeah, watch them wagon the Cardinals, win at the last second, and really prove that Jordan Love has that clutch gene versus the Texans, where no one was actually doubting that the Packers were going to come back on that drive and score. And then you go out there versus the Jaguars, and it's just a chaotic game in Jacksonville in the humidity of Florida. Jordan Love goes out, Malik Willis comes in. Doesn't matter. They both average 14 yards per attempt. I mean, like, you have to give this team a plus. Like, it's the only correct grade.
I think A minus is appropriate only because there's another team on this division that is going to get an A plus. So I'm giving them an A minus only because they are not leading their division, and there's another team that is anointed that position here. But they have
Who is
played
that?
great. That's the last team in this division to go over, which is the Detroit Lions. I mean, good lord, what have they done since we last talked about them in our quarterly check-in? Let's see. Bye week, they annihilated them. Bye week, never again this season. They're packing their bags. Killed the Dallas Cowboys so much that Dementia Jerry went on the radio and bullied local Dallas radio. And then they play a great game against the undefeated Vikings at one point, have a great win, and then take care of business against the Titans, where they only had 225 total offense, but it didn't matter because Khalif Raymond had 200 punt return yards, had a punt return touchdown as well. No matter how they win it, whether it's with special teams, whether it's with defense, whether it's with the running attack, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, you get the idea. They're just going to win regardless. And they've gotten better from last year. Their defense has played a lot better. I think they're motivated. They're ready to prove people wrong even more. They're the number one team in the NFC, like they should have been last year. They get an A plus. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, and A plus is a great grade for the Lions here, and you have to give them the highest grade you could possibly give them. But you can give them an A plus, but I think they deserve the good old double plus for this team because they're going out there. They're not just winning against mediocre teams. They are absolutely wagoning other teams, and they went out there, took Minnesota's best shot. That game seemed like it meant a lot to Minnesota, but you went out there and you just stopped them dead in their tracks. You blow two 10-point leads. It's entertaining football. And then you're just out here with a mission to prove, where everyone wrote this team off. Like, this team won't be a contender in back to back years. Last year was a fluke. Like, those are the people that don't actually pay attention to what goes on in football for more than a single year. When you're stuck in this weird hot take media space where you're like, oh, I think the Lions are the team that's going to fall off this year because they lost in the conference championship and Dan Campbell like shouldn't have gone for it. Like, no, Dan Campbell's not going to lose the locker room. He's gotten better every year. And if you watch this team's trajectory, like, people weren't even expecting them to win a playoff game last year. Like, if they got to the playoffs, that was the bar for this team. And suddenly they get to the conference championships and exceed expectations, and then somehow that's a failure for them. When this year they're where they're supposed to be, absolutely dominating, and you didn't really have teams consistently mentioning them in the conversation until they go out there and beat the Vikings, and until they absolutely destroyed the Titans. And then people are like, okay, maybe there is something to this team. Maybe we should pay attention to more than 1 year or 1 month or 1 day of what happened in football.
Or better yet, maybe they're just not cursed anymore. Maybe they've reversed the curse. And I know they still need to win that Super Bowl, but ultimately, I think they're, of any team in the NFC, I feel like they're most fit to do so currently. So they get the A plus. You give them an A plus plus. Let's go to the AFC North, where we have various
Ugh.
teams with various grades. Let's start at the bottom again. We'll go to Cleveland, and I might actually be nicer to them simply because of last week. But ultimately, this season for the Browns has been hideous. We saw Deshaun Watson leading the front for a majority of this season here, and it's been loss, 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 terrible game after terrible game. Offense sputtering as it does. Last week, they got a good win with Jameis Winston, and I do think that they're going to turn things around slightly. But I can't give them a passing grade because this year they have been the Guantanamo Bay Browns. So I'm still going to give them a D. I think that they're going to be better with Jameis, but at the same time, your team this year has been terrible. And your defense hasn't been quite as good either. So giving them a D right now. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think a D is appropriate for drop the towel for this team. I mean, every time they go out there, they have a lead. You're doing well. All you have to do is keep your towel on, and every single time you just drop it against your opponent. Like whether it's a close game versus the Giants, whether it's a close game versus Philadelphia or the Raiders here. You had 3 games that if you had normal to above average like quarterback play, you could have gone out there and won. Now, did you have a blowout against the Commanders? Yes, but a lot of your games are within one possession. Like um, the Giants game, one possession. The Cowboys kind of destroyed you, but you look at the Eagles game, you look at games like the Bengals game, games versus the Raiders. Like if Jameis plays, like, or if you kept Flacco on this team and ended up benching Deshaun, it's like you definitely could have won 3 of those games and been in the mix for the playoffs still, and it wouldn't be as much of a tall task because you dropped 3 wins against teams you probably should have beat. Now, your schedule still is a little bit easier where you could go on a run if you win some games you're not supposed to, but like you just dropped the towel on this one and you could have been 3 games better than you are right now.
We could be looking at a potentially a 5-3 team, 4-3 team, whatever it might be. But I think they dropped the ball. I do think Jameis is going to help them, but at the end of the day, I know we love Jameis Winston on the show, but I don't think that he's going to give them enough juice for them to go on the run that they did with Joe Flacco last year. I just don't think they're as good of a team either. So ultimately, they're probably going to be 7-10 like they are every other year. So 7-10 is their future, unfortunately. And then let's talk about the Bengals. This is a team that has frustrated me all season long. When we talked about them last quarter, they were 1-3. They just beat the Panthers, although the Panthers put up a lot of points against them. And then they lose to the Ravens in overtime. Nothing wrong with that. And then the last 3 weeks, 17-7 on Sunday Night Football against the Giants. That game was awful to watch. And then Cleveland game, they win 21-14. Not a great offensive performance, but they win the game. That's all that matters. And then the Eagles just dominate them this last week. For them, I'm going to give them a D as well, but this is for disappointment. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You have Zach Moss and Chase Brown, who are decent running attacks. Like their offense should not be bad whatsoever. And I think 3-5 is it's malpractice for this team. That team that should be a 5-3. They shouldn't have lost to the Patriots at this point. Like this team should at least be 4-4, but they're 3-5. And now at this point, the schedule gets harder. You face the Ravens again, and then you face a team like the Steelers twice. And there's games in there that they could also lose. There's games, whether it's Cleveland, who they've always had trouble against. I just they're not making the playoffs this year. They're disappointing. And I think they should look at Zach Taylor potentially, maybe if he's the right fit at head coach, but been disappointed with the Bengals this season. Halfway through, they're getting a D minus.
Yeah. Grade I would give them is a N for nail in my tire. Like this team is just every time it's like if you hit multiple nails within a month that you're just like, I thought we took care of this pressure light issue and we were back. And then suddenly I got another nail in my tire. And I'm like, where do these nails keep coming from? Everyone has had that happen in some point in their life where you never have your tire pressure light come on before. And then suddenly, a couple weeks in a row, you go on a roll there. Maybe there's some construction nearby you or something. And then you just start slowly deflating. You keep pumping your tires back up, but the Bengals seem like a team that's just keeps slowly deflating. Then you get another nail. You're like, okay, this is a situation like versus the Eagles where that is a huge blow to you. And then let's fill it back up. We'll look good for a few other weeks. And then you just have this nonchalant mentality. It's like, yeah, wins don't matter in October and September. It's like, okay, yeah, I get you. Joe Burrow is undefeated, pretty much have one of the best records in November and December, but it doesn't work like that every single year. Injuries do happen. If Jamar Chase goes down, like sometimes, like you're gonna have games where like you should have won earlier to offset some injuries that happen for when you get those players back for the playoffs, but you're not gonna get them back for the playoffs if you're just dropping stupid games that you should be winning and teams you should be dominating against.
Yeah. So Bengals, they got to turn it around. This upcoming month, you face the Raiders next week. Okay, should win that game, and then you face the Ravens on Thursday night, and then the Chargers, who have been a good defensive team, um, they face in Week 11. So, I mean, if you win the next three games and you're 6-5, maybe, but they got to win everything moving forward if they're going to make the playoffs. Because right now, it's not looking great for them, especially when they face the Steelers twice to end the season too.
Yeah. No, Ravens Bengals, that'll be a huge game. If they win that game, that'll decide if they can make the playoffs. But if they lose that, all right, I'm out officially. But I still think they have a chance.
They still have a chance. And then let's talk about the Ravens because when we talked about them last quarter, they were 2-2. They lost their first two, one against Kansas City, one against the Raiders, which they should have never lost. Beat the Cowboys, beat the Bills, and then had that overtime game against the Bengals we just talked about. Beat the Commanders, beat the Bucks, and then they just fell to Jameis Winston last week. 5-3. The tandem with Derrick Henry and Jackson has been fun to watch. They just traded for Deontay Johnson. And I still think like if we're looking at teams who could upset the Chiefs. I do think the Ravens are one of the contenders in the AFC to take a look at. They should be the favorites actually to beat the Chiefs if anybody were to. So I'm gonna still give them an A minus. I think that there's another gear that they can get to. I want to see their defense play better, play like it did last year. And I think now that we're entering into November and December, I really want to start to see that defense lock in. But offensively, they've been probably the funnest team to watch in football. Derrick Henry, the ageless wonder, Lamar Jackson, MVP potentially. But I'll give them an A minus because I think that there's another gear that they can get to.
Yeah, and I think A minus is definitely fair for this team. Like you have to give them an A minus. You lose to a divisional team, you're allowed those losses, and you're still right there at the top of your division. And this is a team people still expected to take a step back. You lose someone like Patrick Queen here, and you have some room to improve on. And this is probably the best passing year we've seen from Lamar. We didn't expect this from Rashad Bateman. And then I would give you a B plus here if you didn't go out there and get Deontay Johnson because you addressed a need on this team. And it wasn't even necessarily a need. You're just like, we need more of that. We need more firepower on offense because we're going to be in some dogfights. We need to prep for some injuries now because Zay Flowers got a little banged up. Rashad Bateman has been a little bit banged up in the past. Mark Andrews coming off an Achilles injury. So they're like, I think we need one more weapon just to be safe here, and they did that. So they have the pieces to do it. So you're in position to go out there and capture it. You still play the Steelers twice. So let's go out there, get it done. So the fact that you got Deontay Johnson, I was gonna give you a B plus, but that bumps you up to A minus because it shows you where your head's at right now.
Yeah, they're going all in this year, I think. Last team to talk about the division leader, Pittsburgh Steelers. Talked about them last. We didn't know whether this was a September team, if they were going to take a step back. This last month, they had a weird game against Dallas where there was a lightning storm. The game didn't end until 2 a.m. Lost that game. Okay. And then they beat the Raiders the way they should. They beat the Jets the way they should. And they beat the Giants on Monday night. We saw Russell Wilson come back. He looks like as close to Russell Wilson as we've seen pretty much since the Seattle days. A decision that was very controversial at the time, but it looks like it's paying off. This is a team that the defense is a Super Bowl winning team. Their offense looks a hell of a lot better than it has the last 5 years, with Najee starting to really get it going. George Pickens as well. If they can get another receiver before the deadline is over, I'll be happy to see. But this is a team I've been really happy to see and how they've been. I think Russell Wilson could be, hopefully, if he continues his momentum, to be really good for them as well. So I'm going to give them an A as of right now. And I think that coming into it, I think they might actually win this division when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I think they have to get an A plus for what they've done in this division. I mean, you go out there and judging what you did with Russell Wilson, you're going out there and dominating teams right now. And this is the first time where their offense has come alive, where they finally unlocked Najee Harris. And a lot of people gave him flack, but like maybe it's because you had a quarterback who couldn't throw touchdowns, which is when you have a quarterback who can't throw touchdowns, what is the running back supposed to do? And the defense is like, okay, just make sure they don't run it in. And then if we play man coverage, chances are Kenny Pickett's not going to get the touchdown there or Mason Rudolph. And now you have the upgraded version of Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who are both a lot better than both of those quarterbacks. And Russ has looked like, I mean, if he could win comeback player of the year just for playing better, or maybe most improved player of the year if you get worse and then you get better again. I don't know. Maybe he could win an award for something, but he's just been better than he has been. And I had no expectations for Russell Wilson coming to the Steelers because I've seen what he's done in Denver before. And it just gave me cause to pause. So I didn't want to get my hopes up, but so far, this is beyond the best version of Russell Wilson I thought we could get in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he's been exceptional. I want to see him continue it, but yeah, they've been great. That's why they get that A grade. Let's get the South out of the way on both sides. I'll start with the NFC again, but we'll start. Let's start top to bottom this time because let's not talk about the Panthers until we absolutely have to. The
Or the Saints.
Falcons, or the Saints. The Falcons, right? They started off 2-2. Kirk Cousins was getting into momentum, and then week 5 they have the best Thursday night game of the season. Kirk Cousins submits himself as a Hall of Fame candidate when it's all said and done. They've won 3 of the last 4. They did lose to the Seahawks, but they beat the Bucks again, sweeping the Bucks this series, and they look like the best team in that division. With everything, all the expectations, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, who is Kyle Pitts, I have to give them an A as well. Kirk Cousins, I've been impressed with how he's played down the stretch. And I think the Falcons, they're in the driver's position to win that division. Kirk Cousins, third in passing yards, fifth in touchdowns. He's looking really good. So, Hall of Fame Kirk all the way. I'll take that A grade.
Yeah. No, I'll take the A grade as well because the Falcons have been above average. And I think this is, some of the best we've seen Kirk Cousins play in his career, and it's crazy that he's coming off an Achilles injury here, and we're seeing both him and Aaron Rodgers come off. And Rodgers probably having the worst year of his career, but he's 41. We can forget that. No one expected him to be elite this year except for lunatics who root for the Jets. And then you have Kirk Cousins, who's having the best year of his career, winning one possession games, and then he just won the 2 games that could probably seal the division, which I mean, you go out there and then you battle with Baker Mayfield and just play better than him, and your team's able to get it done. And then your defense is coming alive. Your head coach, unlike Seattle's coach this year, in Mike McDonald, we'll call him Norm McDonald on the show, has kind of forgotten about the defense. And they've gotten worse every week. But the Falcons defense is still getting better here. They locked down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I just think they're above average and they've exceeded my expectations for how good I thought they could be because when you fix Kyle Pitts, somehow suddenly he's good. He went from Johnny Smith is outplaying him last year to, oh no, he's actually a good tight end now. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's a Sam Darnold esque transformation with Kyle Pitts this year.
Yeah, he's been great for them this year. And then Drake London is another guy. He looked fine last year, but this year he looks like he's an actual number one. So I like what I've seen from them. Raheem Morris has been a good hire for them, so I like it. Now let's go to the Bucks. They were 3-1 to start, and then since then they had that overtime game that could have gone either way. But when you face Hall of Fame Kirk Cousins, it's a tough game that you have to pull out. Then they beat up on the Band Aid New Orleans Saints, lose to the Ravens, lose to the Falcons. Looks like they are slipping a little bit. Chris Godwin out for the season. Mike Evans banged up as well. But the running attack from last year has gotten better. We have Bucky Irving, who's now in the mix. We have Tucker, another player that's been good for them. And then occasionally we'll see Rashad White. But this is a team that I feel like is trending in the wrong direction as we enter into the second half of the season. I'm going to give them a B minus. I still think that they can be competitive for that seventh um, seed, but I ultimately don't think that they'll make the playoffs just based on injuries alone. So I'm going to give them. I'll give them a C plus actually.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a B minus for bubble wrap because that's what this team is being held together with. They needed more of it coming into the season, but with bubble wrap, you don't really think to buy it until you need it. And that's what the Buccaneers found themselves in. And I think you can still make the playoffs, though, with Mike Evans coming back after their bye, I believe, around week 11. So I think this team can still make a push just because you're going to play teams like the Saints, play teams like the Panthers at the end of the year. So I think there are some winnable games for them this year. And potentially you're going to be in the mix for the playoffs. But you still did hold it together without your two best receivers, and B also for Bucky Irving. Shout out to him, averaging as a rookie over 5 yards a carry, 5.2 yards a carry. So he's in the second down club, where if you run it with him twice, you're gonna get a first down every single time with Bucky Irving. So still some bright spots with this team, and I do think their run game and K Dotton has been good enough to carry them so far, especially like Rashad White and Bucky Irving have been dangerous out of the backfield. Like Baker still has some weapons at least.
Yeah, and honestly, McMillan's been good for them too. So Bucks, I don't think their season's over, but we got to see how they do in quarter three. Let's talk about the Saints next. If we did this segment week two, this team would have gotten A plus 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 all around the board. They were honestly the Super Bowl champions after week two, but unfortunately, there are more weeks in the season, 15 weeks to be exact. Since then, they have lost to the Eagles and lost to the Falcons and lost to the Chiefs and lost to the Bucks and lost to the Broncos. Sorry, and lost to the Chargers as well. They've lost 6 straight games. They have the longest losing streak in all of football. If I can give the 49ers the same grade, I'm going to give them another grade as well. This looks very blurry, but a band aid is what they need. I'll give them an F for falling apart because that is what is happening to the New Orleans scene. At this point, I can call them the New Orleans substitutes. I can call them the WNFL team. I can call them the XFL Saints, whatever you want to call them. Is it even fair to like criticize them at this point? At this point, everyone's hurt. They have their third string quarterback. They have second string running backs, fourth string wide receivers, offensive linemen. The whole team's falling apart. So honestly, I think F for falling apart is appropriate, or maybe just the band aid emoji, as I mentioned.
Yeah, band aid emoji or ooh, I fall apart for the Saints because that's what's been happening this season. I mean, you can give them a B for bandage, you can give them a D for diaper
Damage.
because he might need one. D for damage. D for depends. D for duct tape because that's what this team is being held uh, together with. You can give him a P for plague at this point. You could even give him a W for West Nile because that's what it looks like this team's been hit with at this point. I don't know if West Nile's running through the state of Louisiana, but it sure looks like it hit New Orleans. Or O for osteoporosis because everyone's bones are getting broken.
Good lord. Yeah. Give them any grade. I like my band aid emoji personally, but
I like
let's
it.
talk about this last team here. Team that no team likes talking about, but Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. What have they done since we talked about them last? Well, they scored 10 points against the Bears, 36 to 10 loss. Falcons 38 to 20 loss. Commanders 40 to 7 loss. And then actually, you know what? Against the Broncos, they did score 2 touchdowns. So that's cool. So good for them. Maybe they're trending in the right direction here. But Now, at this point, they're going to continue forward with Bryce Young for the remainder of the season, which basically means that they're not going to win another game. So, if I can give them a lower grade than F, I can give them a G for goddamn. I can give them a H for hell no. I can give them an M for my God, you suck. I don't know. Give me any sort of grade that's creative and funny. A Z for you put me to sleep, whatever it might be. But yeah, they're vying for that number one overall pick. They're in contention with the Raiders and the Patriots.
Yeah, I agree. You could definitely give them a G for Ghost. Like they're there, but they're not there this year, and I don't think they will be for a long time. You can give a B for Blip on the radar. We kind of saw them, a flash of them, but then our satellites couldn't pick them up. You could give them a U for just unplugged. Sometimes you just gotta unplug it and plug it back in, meaning get rid of David Tepper and put in a new owner, and then maybe that'll just work for your team. But until you unplug it and plug it back in and get rid of David Tepper, like this team is not going anywhere. We're gonna have a new quarterback and a new coach every single year here. And then so many grids are going to be filled out with this Panthers team. They'll be like Deontay Johnson. Where did he play? What is the fourth team that he played on? People are going to forget that he played for the Panthers. And then you're gonna have players like Miles Sanders, like he didn't play on any teams besides the Eagles. Hayden Hurst. You're just gonna have all these random dudes that's like they played for the Panthers. Like, yeah, I forgot about that.
Jadavian Clowney.
See? Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
see, Jadavian Clowney. We're gonna see the Adam Thielen's like, wait, yeah, that's right, he did play for the Panthers. But yeah, they are
Yeah,
the
and it's
only
like
team in the NFL that has a point differential over minus 100, minus 147 is their point. They're on
yeah.
pace to have the worst point differential in the history of football.
They literally have a team full of Raymond Feltons.
Pretty much. Yep. And it's not a pretty sight, but they suck, and we know that. Now we go to the AFC South. Do we want to start from the bottom or are we going to start from the top here?
You can start from the top.
All right. We'll start with the Texans. The Texans are 6-2. Since we last spoke about them, they beat the Bills, they beat the Patriots, had a tough game against the Packers, but they did it was a close game nonetheless. And then the Colts game they did edge out. So they're sitting pretty at 6-2. They have a Thursday night game against the Jets coming up where they could bury the Jets once and for all. But they lost Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins is banged up as well. I still feel like they're a good team, and I think they're not quite in the same bubble as the Ravens or maybe even the Bills at this point with their injuries and how they've performed this year. I'll still give them a B because I still think that they're a good team, maybe a B plus, simply because I still think that they're going to be in it at the end. I just need to see them hit that second gear. I want to see CJ Stroud step it up a little bit. Joe Mixon's been a great addition for him, even with his injuries as well. But give him a B plus. I still think that they're going to be in it at the end, but I think that they're not quite as good as the Ravens at this point.
Yeah, I don't think they're as good as the Ravens, and they haven't been elite. But I will give them a B here. So, like it's kind of they've been like a B minus team throughout the year, but you did go out there and beat the Bills, and the Bills have still been blowing other teams out, and they look similar to what they have been the past few years. So that's a solid pickup for you, just to differentiate yourself. Then you go to Green Bay. That was really who had the ball last. Is what it came down to. Nico Collins will be back for this team. So I think you can get into that upper echelon and have a quarter where maybe you go out there and get an A and this team gets better, but your defense still has played well at times and has been consistently good. But I just think overall, it's just been a B team where this team hasn't wowed me. And every game that they've won, they've just kind of looked mid.
Yeah, but I think maybe second half they turn things around as we get to November and December. Hopefully, we see the team that I anointed them as a Super Bowl favorite beginning of the season, and I still feel like they're in the Super Bowl bubble in the AFC, but I need them to have that second half push for me to feel comfortable continuing with that bet. Next team is the Colts, and since we last talked about them, they were 2-2, and now they are 4-4. They bench Anthony Richardson after he gets tired and needs his blankie, and now he can sit at home with his blankie and milky and chocolate chip cookies and get the rest that he deserves as Joe Flacco has taken over. I'm going to give them a J for Joe Flacco. I think we're going to see another, not maybe not quite the same run as we saw last year, but I do think we're going to see Joe Flacco play some good football and put them in the playoffs potentially. They face the Vikings on Sunday Night Football this week, and then
Ooh.
they have a couple of tough games ahead of them with the Lions on their schedule, with the Bills potentially. So I think they have a tough schedule ahead. We'll see by the end of this quarter whether or not they will make the playoffs. But as of right now, I'm giving them a J for Joe Flacco, the savior potentially for the Colts this season.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the savior here, and I think your average this year, it was, I'll give you a T for tough with Anthony Richardson, because when he wasn't playing this season, it just looked better. The offense looked normal. Suddenly, Josh Downs was a factor. Alec Pierce was a factor. Michael Pittman came alive, and you still have a prime Jonathan Taylor here. And your defense has played really well. So if you continue to bench Anthony Richardson, I think that T will go away and you'll start to get like a B plus type of team, because I do think that this offense is better than Cleveland's was it last year, because you have Jonathan Taylor when Joe Flacco was there. Nick Chubb went down. And then, sure, you had Amari Cooper, but at this point, I'll take Michael Pittman and then just Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. I think it's a better overall team. Maybe you don't have a Miles Garrett, but the defense still has played really well. And then the offensive line still has been moving people out of the way this season. Like, I don't know. This is still a team that can make some noise in the playoffs if Flacco plays to the standard he set for himself last season, because I think this is a better team than Cleveland was last year.
Yeah, I agree. Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, all those guys. He has more touchdowns than Anthony Richardson this year, and I think we can see him have a similar run like he had last year. I think maybe a little bit better. We like Shane Steichen a lot here, so I guess we'll see how they plan out this next half. Let's talk about the Jaguars. When we talked about them last time, they were 0 and 4. They looked like a complete mess of a team. They went out, they beat the Colts in a battle, and then they went to London twice. They lost to the Bears, they beat the Patriots, and then had a tough game against the Packers, which they were competitive in. Last year, I think I gave them a Z or I gave them an F for how bad they were. I think, although they are 2 and 6, I think they've played better this last quarter. So I'll promote them to a D. I still think they're disappointing, and I still think that they're a better team than what they say they are. But I think this past quarter, beating the Colts, beating the Patriots, and then playing competitively against the Packers, I think there's room for growth this upcoming quarter. They face the NFC North, but ultimately, I think they still can improve.
Yeah, and I'll give them a C minus, because I can't put them as competent yet, where I'll be confident that they'll go out there and win games per se, but I won't be surprised anymore when they do win games, and just need to see them string together a few more. So like C is like, okay, you're competent. I can pick you to win a game, but I still really can't pick the Jaguars to go out there and win a team unless it's really against a bottom feeder. But I do feel like you could finish out the season at a B minus for this Jaguars team and potentially go out there and make a run. Like Bigsby is coming alive. You're putting it together now with Thomas, your rookie wide receiver, and then you also have Christian Kirk, who maybe he'll come alive here. Evan Ingram has picked it up though the past few weeks. Maybe that was just tight end stay, but he's played better in the second half of the season. So I do think you can still get a competent Jaguars team, and they should finish strong.
And then last team is the Titans. When we talked about them, they just beat the lowly Miami Dolphins in week 4. And since then, they have been outscored. Let's see if I can do math quickly here. 20-17 against the Colts, 34-10 against the Bills, and 52-14 to the Lions. So that is 86, 106 to 31 has what they've been outscored on in the last 3 weeks. I feel like I can only give them an F at this point. Will Levis isn't even out there, so I don't even get to share a laugh anymore. I get to see Helmet Boy or Gamer Word Boy Mason Rudolph. I don't know if I love seeing that Titans team. This team just seems old. They just seem like every person that's on that team that's good is just going to die there, like the Tony Pollards, like the Calvin Ridleys, like the Jeffrey Simmons. I just think this team ultimately, this is a team that's going to be contending for that number one overall pick potentially as they look for the future. Um, they have a couple of wins on their schedule this upcoming quarter, like the Patriots this upcoming week, but I just don't see much optimism for this team for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give him the good old OW. Everyone has one. Everyone subscribes to a only Wills, right? Only Will Levis. Like that's all I want with this Titans team. Like, if it's not Will Levis, don't care, no interest, just another bad team. But when Will Levis is playing, it's something magical about how bad they are. There's something to the chaos there, so you just want to check in, see what's going on, get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain with the Titans. So, gonna give him a OW. Only Will. Only Will
Only
Levis.
will.
That's the only time we care.
I will pay the highest subscription cost for that. Good lord. I miss Will Levis. It was the best worst football I've ever seen. It's like watching a train crash every single play. Well, let's go to the last divisions. We'll start in the NFC again. We'll do the East, um, and we'll start at the bottom here. Let's talk about the Giants because, good God, they beat the Browns in Week 3. That was the highlight of last quarter. This quarter, they beat the Seahawks in Week 5, but 17-7 against the Bengals, they lose. 28-3 against the Eagles, and then the Steelers game, 26-18. They're now 2-6. Daniel Jones, surprise, surprise, not the answer. Who would have thought? When 5 of the 6 seasons, he's been 2 or 6 or worse. When he hasn't thrown more than 20 touchdowns in all but one season, who would have thought that that wouldn't have panned out? And now they face the Commanders this upcoming week, which they'll probably lose. And I just don't see a lot of wins left on their schedule. Maybe they beat the Panthers in Week 10, but not looking pretty for them. They deserve a D for dumb, D for Daniel, D for disappointment, D for dumbass for signing Daniel Jones to $140 million and not signing Saquon Barkley for half of that price. Everything that has gone wrong for the Giants this year is their fault. So, yeah, they're just pathetic. Maybe P for pathetic is what I would call the Giants.
P for pathetic. I have a perfect grade for them, and I feel like it sums up what the Giants have been, and it sums up what watching them is like. I'm gonna give them an O for overcooked steak, because that's what the Giants are. It's like, you've ever get a steak where you're just like,
Chewing on it.
mm-hmm. And it's like, doesn't matter how small you cut it, and then when you're trying to cut it, and it's just like they're like a bottom shelf, fatty, overcooked steak. It's just gristle, overcooked, and no matter how many times you chew it, maybe you can get a little bit of protein out of it. Maybe you can get some gains from it, but at the end of the day, it's not going anywhere. Just like the New York Giants.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Eesh, gross. And then we
It
go
puts an
to
image in your mouth, though, right?
it does. It makes me think of all the gross steak that I've had in my day. Um, Now we go to the Dallas Cowboys, who sit at third place in their division. They in the last quarter they beat the Steelers in a freakish Sunday night rainstorm, lightning storm, 2 a.m. game, and then they get embarrassed by the Lions, embarrassed by the bye week, and the 49ers game in which it was basically 30-14, but ultimately they ran up the score a little bit, but yeah, what is there to say? They can't run the football. Dak Prescott has regressed since getting paid the most money in NFL history. Um, I'm going to give them a D for dementia. Dementia Jerry, who has gone on multiple occasions, pretty much every single week this past quarter, and has said the craziest shit. We now have Joe Biden running the Dallas Cowboys. Good God. I'm going to give them a D for dementia, maybe A for Alzheimer's, whatever it might be. The Cowboys are cooked, and they're not a good team. I don't think they make the playoffs this year, and I think this season's going to get a lot uglier before it gets better.
Yeah, speaking of dementia, speaking of Joe Biden, I'm gonna give him a G for garbage, just like Joe Biden just said. And we all know what it is. It's garbage. It's trash, man. It stinks. We throw it out. Sometimes you slip on a banana peel. You're gonna throw the banana peel out. You gotta take out the trash. But Jerry Jones and his dementia self is leaving banana peels all over the organization. Banana peel one, didn't fire Mike McCarthy. Two, Dak Prescott's the highest paid quarterback in the league, which is absolutely mind blowing when you could literally tank this year and get a really good quarterback in the draft, and your team is bad enough to do that. But no, will they do that? Absolutely not. Then you pay CeeDee Lamb, and now you're just locked into mediocrity forever. So it's like we all know what it is. We see it. It's a high salary cap. It's a poor head coach. It's a you know the guy. You know Dak. He's paid too much. It's like it's garbage. The Cowboys are garbage.
Garbage, trash, dare I say? That's an appropriate rating. Cowboys are pathetic, and I think let's look at their schedule real quick because it's not going to get good for them. Right now, they're 3-4, and the rest this upcoming schedule, right, for the next 4 games, they face the Falcons on at 1 o'clock. They lose the Eagles. Based on what I've seen from them, they're going to lose that game. The Texans on Monday night, I think they lose also. And then the Commanders game in Week 12, a team that is better than them at this point. That's 4 losses. At that point, they'll have 6 consecutive losses, I think. Maybe they win one of those games, but by then, I don't think Mike McCarthy has a job. I think we're most likely going to see the end of Mike McCarthy
Oh, he will. He's not gonna fire.
by the
Did
end of
he
it.
fire Jason Garrett in season? Like, I think he'll wait till
Uh,
after.
I
I
think he
think we
waited.
could see another year of Mike McCarthy with Jerry Jones. We're not making any changes at the trade deadline. Like, if he doesn't see like needing to trade for other players on this team, you can't see a world. You can't envision like we should move on from Mike McCarthy, but you can't see a world where Jerry Jones is like, well, Micah was hurt. you know.
Anything's possible. I'd like to think because his contract's up that they won't do that, but Cowboys always find a way to embarrass themselves. So I suppose. Let's talk about the Eagles, a team that is better than them at this point. Um, they were 2-2 last quarter. Now they beat the bye week in week 5, and then they beat the Browns. They destroyed the Giants and then destroyed the Bengals. It looks like maybe they're starting to turn things around. They were really clunky to start. It seems like they're starting to piece things together. Do you think that they might make the playoffs? Saquon Barkley's played good football. I'm going to give them a B as of right now because I think their schedule gets easier as well. They have some easy wins coming up. So I'll give them a B. I don't think that they're nearly as good as the Commanders at this point, but they have the talent to be competitive, to be in the playoffs. So I'll give them a B for now. Hopefully, Jalen Hurts starts to step into his own and Saquon continues what he's doing.
Yeah, I'll give them a B plus, and I'm feeling generous today. Sometimes we're a show of love, and then you go out there and you just look good when you have AJ Brown out there, and Devontae Smith was out there too. So it's like, who really was Jalen Hurts supposed to throw the ball to? I feel like people miss some context sometimes. Like, sure, we have Saquon, but your tight end, your wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 2 are hurt. Like, yeah, a lot of guys are going to struggle like that. And the Eagles held it together, and now their offense is coming alive. The defense will be the question mark, and I think it's what's going to hold them back at the end of it. But overall, with Saquon and AJ Brown on the field, this has looked like a dominant playoff team. And then Jalen Hurts is getting a little bit of his legs back. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, albeit the gayest play ever invented in football, where a bunch of dudes just push your butt forward. But that's part of the game, and it's why we like watching it. But overall, the Eagles. Overall, the Eagles have played well, so I think they deserve a B plus.
They do. Another team that's been winning and playing well, the Commanders. They were 3-1 in the first quarter. Second quarter, they were also 3-1. They beat up on the Browns like they should have. They lost to the Ravens, no shame in that. They killed the Panthers as they should have. And then Jaden Daniels against the tough Bears defense had that Hail Mary throw to win the game thanks to Tyreek Stevenson. But they're 6-2. Jaden Daniels has looked like the best quarterback in that draft, and their rushing attack has been effective as well. Cliff Kingsbury rejuvenating his career. I feel like with what we thought the Commanders were going to be, I got to give him an A plus again. Jaden Daniels again playing excellent football. I'm looking at his numbers here. We're talking 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, and he's getting it done with his legs as well. Commanders look like they're going to win that division, and they face the Giants this week, and then I think it starts to get a little easier in the last half of the season. So I like the Commanders a lot. I think that they're going to win it. So A plus for them.
Yeah, A plus, and it definitely exudes confidence with this team when you were supposed to be near the bottom of the division. Where okay, you got Frankie Louvu on this defense, but the Giants went out there and got Brian Burns, and people in the media are delusional to think that losing Saquon Barkley but adding Malik Neighbors is suddenly going to translate into having a good offense when your offense was running the football and Daniel Jones can't get players the football. Like that is a math equation that is not algebra. This isn't calculus, not even algebra 2 or some trigonometry here. It's basic. 3 minus 3 is going to be a net zero for our offense here and cancel out. It's 3 plus negative 3. It is 100 minus 99. Like, we all understand, like, Saquon was the Giants' offense. Some people didn't. And then you overtake them. You're the division leader now above the Eagles and the Cowboys and past both those teams. Like, you're still surpassing expectations. You're getting a little bit of luck as well, which is going to give you confidence when you win some games you shouldn't, because you're going to go out there and win the games you should. Like, I think this is still a really good Commanders team, and they're primed to make a push to win the division this year. So A plus all around. Because when expectations come into play, like no one thought they'd be at this point in the season this early. Like people were like, "Is Jaden Daniels good?" Like we don't know. Like
Yeah,
really?
now we know. Now we definitely know. Let's talk about the last division. We can start at the bottom again. The New York Jets. This is the team that Mike Greenberg put as a Super Bowl team potentially. When we looked at them the first month of the season, they were 2-2. They just had an ugly game against the Broncos, but since then, in London, they lose to the Vikings, they lose to the Bills, they get killed by the Steelers, and then they lose to the lowly Patriots, not even with Drake May, but with Jacoby Brissett, a team that is slated to be one of the most disappointing teams of all time and maybe the sixth most disappointing team in Jets history. I can't give them a B because that's a passing grade, so I'm going to give them a bruh, bruh. Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame wide receiver, top defense, Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. Bruh, what? I can't be that. It can't be that hard. And then not only that, the Vikings game, you're 2-3. You fire Robert Saleh. What are we doing here? The Jets have continuously gotten worse since then. They're now 0-3 since firing Robert Saleh. Maybe, just maybe, Robert Saleh wasn't the problem. The Jets are going nowhere fast. Even into this upcoming week, I just don't see they do very well. I think they end up winning 6 games at the end of it, but pathetic. P for pathetic, B for bruh, A for anemic, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The Jets are just god awful and just disappointing as always.
Yeah, and the crazy part was the lunatics spewing propaganda that they were going to be somehow a contender in the AFC this year when Aaron Rodgers hasn't been a contender for the past few years and hasn't really made any noise in the playoffs in the recent half of the decade here. And the Jets, year after year, continue to just be the Sharknado of the NFL. I don't understand how they keep putting out movies this bad, how they keep putting out teams and seasons this bad, and figure out a way to continuously make us semi entertaining because it's football product, but it's just they don't go into theaters here. Not a ton of people watch them. Not everyone knows who they are. They have some fans, but not really. Every once in a while, you'll see like a glimmer. Like I could see how that could be something where you could take that and make it a good movie, but overall it's just like watching a sci-fi movie. It's just repeatedly disappointment, bland, making poor choices, not spending money on the right things here. It's like another disappointing season for the Jets. Business as usual. Slap a different title on it.
Yeah, slap a different title. I think they're going to continue to fall. Let's go to the Patriots. Let's see. They had a big win in week one against the Bengals, which is what we highlighted last quarter. This quarter, they end the quarter by beating the Jets, a team that we just beat up on pretty hysterically. Well, they lose to the Texans, which is fine. They have that ugly game against the Dolphins, which those both teams were terrible. And then Jacksonville in London, they did lose to pretty handedly. But it looks like Drake May, get him some weapons, get him a running back, get him a coach, and an offensive line, and maybe, just maybe, they got themselves their quarterback. The fact that they have 2 wins halfway through the season means that they're on pace to win 4 games again. And I feel like, we'll see how they do, but not in love with Gerard Mayo as the head coach. I'm not in love with how their defense has been performing. But they got their future. I'm not going to give them an F quite yet. I'll give them a D because I think that ultimately they're not very impressive. But really, to see is how we're going to see how good Gerard Mayo is if this upcoming stretch of games they just lose out and basically turn on Gerard Mayo, which I fear is probably what's going to happen. But for now, I give them a D.
Yeah. No, D is fair. I'm gonna give them an M though for my pillow. It's like you ever just lay on one of those my pillows and you're like, it's so soft. What a soft team. So it's like, honestly, Gerard Mayo, you graded this team already for us. And honestly, I'm going to steal from the people getting paid to coach football. So, like, you think your team is soft. Honestly, I kind of think your team is soft as well because, well, you did beat the Jets. You kind of have a thing versus the Jets. But, Drake May is soft. Already has a concussion. He's out. Christian Gonzalez, it seems like he gets injured. Every other play, your offensive line isn't bullying anybody this year. You've struggled with your pass rush, so like, yeah, you get an M for my pillow because you've just been that soft this year. That comfortable, restful sleep where you can close your eyes, fall asleep, and you know
I
the
like it.
Patriots aren't gonna do shit.
Nope. Let's talk about another team that has also been bad. Oh, oh, we good? We back?
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you.
I'm not sure what's going on. Hello? Okay, good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, let's talk about the last team in this division that has been disappointing. We have the Dolphins. Tua bangs his head. He's out for a good chunk of time. They lose to the Titans. They beat the Patriots in a hideous game. Lose to the bye week. Lose to the Colts, and then they just lose to the Cardinals. If I can give the Jets this grade, I'm going to give it to them too. I'm giving them another bruh. Bruh. The hell is this? When you had Tyler Huntley, Tyreek Hill is no longer the cheetah. He is now just a my pillow, or maybe one of those animal pillows you get at the zoo. Jalen Waddle, he now becomes a pet that you get at the aquarium. You get one of those stuffed aquarium pillows. And then A Train is now an A bus or maybe an A scooter. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But their team is terrible without Tua, who is maybe the 15th best quarterback in the league. I'm giving them a bruh, just like I gave the Jets. B for bruh, D for disappointment, W for watering my eyes with disappointment. Good Lord. The Dolphins, terrible. I think they turn it around with Tua, but they're still not going to make the playoffs. They're still not a very good team. Their defense still sucks. So, Dolphins, you get a bro rating.
Yeah, bruh is a good rating for the Dolphins, and I like the bruh rating coming out. But yeah, I feel like people thought Mike McDaniels was this Miami Vice type of head coach where it's like, ooh, he's embracing the culture of Miami. Look at his hair now. Everyone is talking about how much of a great coach he is when they really haven't accomplished that much in the playoffs and when it matters here. So I think when people thought they were Miami Vice, in reality, they're more like Tiger King here, where sometimes it's a fun and wild show, but when Tua isn't there, there's like nothing going on here. Like I don't understand how Raheem Mostert forgets how to run. Mike McDaniels can't figure out how to make a single backup quarterback good. And you're a head coach, you think you should have some input on the backup quarterback here where Tua has a problem with injuries. He's pretty much gotten injured in every single season at some point, and you don't think having an exceptional backup quarterback, one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, is a top priority for you? No, you're crazy if you don't. But you bring in these guys who are like, yeah, we're gonna run it with Skylar Thompson. He's dead now, even though Skylar Thompson's never looked good in an NFL game. He's looked fine, but you never look at him like, yeah, that's a guy who can step up and win us a game. Like, no, that's a guy where you hold your breath every single time he drops back and starts to read the defense. You're like, oh boy, here we go. And then Brent Huntley, same thing. Oh boy, here we go. You didn't think you should be going out and trying to get a Carson Wentz, trying to get a Joe Flacco, someone like that. You saw what Flacco did last year. You don't think he'd want to retire in Miami instead of Indy? What are you doing?
Yeah. What are you doing? So Dolphins are going nowhere. The Jets are going nowhere. The Patriots are going nowhere. That leaves one last team to cover, which is the Buffalo Bills, a team that our YouTube comments don't typically love when we talk about the Bills, but I'll be nice to them right now. Week 5, they lose to the Texans, which are a good team. That's perfectly fine. They got killed by the Ravens the week before, but they have now since beat the Jets. They beat up on the Titans pretty handedly, and they beat up on the Seahawks pretty handedly. What I can say about the Bills this year is their defense has played better than I expected. When you cut your entire defense, as any normal person would think, maybe their defense isn't going to be as good, but their defense has been fine. They couldn't stop the Ravens or Texans, which I think is fine looking at their offenses respectively. But Josh Allen has only thrown one interception for this year. He's played great football. They just got Amari Cooper. Um, their receiver core, not in love with Keon Coleman. He's kind of a coin flip wide receiver at this point. So I guess he fills the shoes of Gabe Davis. But I've been impressed with what the Bills have been. I think that they could be probably the 2 seed when it's all said and done, just given their schedule with everyone else in that division. So I'm going to give them an A minus. I think that they've had a really good season and they've exceeded my expectations just simply with how much they had lost this past year. They're in a good position overall.
Yeah, I think they're in a good position solely because you're in position to get a home playoff game here. But I will give you a B plus. Anytime you've played a team that's competitive and should be in the playoffs this year, you've lost, and every time you've played a team that probably won't be in the playoffs, you've won this year. So it's like it's a clear trend. Like when they run into a contender, they haven't shown really any signs that they're going to win those games, except for the Texans. But the Texans have looked like kind of a kind of an average, mediocre team trying to find their way at some point this season. And then Nico Collins goes down in that game, and that's kind of what turned it around for you. But before that, you're getting beaten pretty badly when they're at full strength in that game. Best receiver goes down. It happens. But the fact that the reason you won that game was you had all of the momentum in that game and could have won, but you decide to have Josh Allen almost throw 2 interceptions in the red zone, no situational awareness, and then your punter literally accidentally lined up out of bounds in that game when all you need to do is get to overtime. You have all the momentum. Chances are you win that game. It's just like moments like that. I still have pause to cause with the Bills where I can't wrap my arms around them as an A quality team. Like you're a B plus, sure, you're that every single year, but you're never really an A. Sometimes you have a great year out of Josh Allen and make a run in the playoffs to the conference championship. But some years, like you just lose to the better teams and you beat the teams that you should, and it's very similar to how the Dallas Cowboys kind of performed last season.
Yeah. It remains to see. I mean, they face the Chiefs this next quarter, and then they face, I believe, the 49ers as well. So maybe those games they can move the needle a little bit. But yeah, I think there are two chances to prove it. They haven't proved it yet. So that's a fair point. I say after all of our grades have been submitted, we put away our clipboards, we put away our pencils and our reading glasses, and now it's time to get into the weaves of the second half of the NFL season. We're now officially going to enter into November, and now we're entering into week 9. And we start off on Thursday night. We have the Texans taking on the New York Jets in New York. Right now, Vegas is saying that the Jets are favored at -2 at home, meaning the Texans have 1 point edge. You can get these games as cheap as $12 if you happen to be there on
In New
Halloween
York,
in New York. Yep, East Rutherford. Over under of 42 and a half. Jets are looking to win something, just get momentum going whatsoever after losing 3 straight. And the Texans looking to move on with life without Stephon Diggs.
yeah, I mean, this was a game that the Texans lost last year. And it was one of the uglier losses where you're like, how good are the Texans really this season? However, you're going back to New York to avenge that loss, and Stephon Diggs did go down. However, the Jets just aren't it this season. They've gotten worse every single game that Robert Sala has been gone. you just lost to the Patriots. Now, can they muster it up on a short turnaround after losing to New England on a Thursday night? I don't know. But right now, I have to go with the Texans because if you're Houston and you lose this game, huge problem because your defense should be good enough to win this game alone, even if Aaron Rodgers, plays like himself here. But your offense should be good enough in tandem with your defense. Like, you should go out there, and I don't expect you to roll over the Jets on a Thursday night, but you should at least win by a touchdown in this game. There's no excuse not to.
Yeah, I think this is a game that the Jets have to win, but I don't think just because they have to win that they will is the situation here. I think the Texans, again, they're a team that's vying for maybe it's not the one seed, but at least the two seed. They still want to win that division. The Colts aren't that far behind them. So I still think the Texans win. I think when your offensive line is as bad as it is for the Jets and you have Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter breathing down your neck all game, it's not going to be great. Jets don't have a coach either. So there's really nothing I can really bank on for the Jets unless if Brees Hall goes parabolic and Aaron Rodgers turns back the clock. So I'll take the Texans. I think they win by a field goal in like a 23-20 fashion, but I think ultimately Texans should win and have control.
They should.
Now let's go to the 1 o'clock slates here. Looks like we'll have 4 games in the 4 o'clock slate this week.
Finally.
Thank God. So we have Dallas going to Atlanta to take on Kirko Cousins, Hall of Famer, at 1 o'clock. Falcons are favorited at 2.5 with the over under at 51.5. Vegas is saying points will be put on the board in this game. And if I'm looking at this as an objective Kirk Cousins enthusiast, 1 o'clock is his time frame that he does shine. Kirk Cousins having a Hall of Fame year for a Hall of Fame quarterback. So give me the Falcons. I think the Falcons take care of business, shut down the run, or what is left of the running game for the Cowboys. AJ Terrell is a key matchup against CD Lamb. Can they hold him within 100 yards? I think we see Kirk Cousins throw for 300 yards. We see a good game from Bijan, and I think the Falcons win. I'm going to say 31-21.
Yeah, and with this Cowboys team, like CeeDee Lamb could average 150 yards and a touchdown a game, and it wouldn't matter for this offense. Like, what else is there? Who else is getting touchdowns? What running back are you relying now that Rico Dowdle got hurt and you have to run it with Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott and Jake Ferguson's been pretty good, but then Brandon Cooks like just hasn't been a reliable receiver. It's like you can't really rely on anyone else, and the fact that just came off that 49ers loss, now you're going up against another team with a winning record coming off a big win in Tampa. I think this will be a solid game for Atlanta here. And I think, Atlanta will get a lead. Dak Prescott will struggle at the beginning of the game. And then in the fourth quarter, Dak Prescott will put up a bunch of numbers. So fans will be like, hey, look at the stats that he's putting up in this quarter. Look at how close the game was. He almost brought us back. It's like, yeah, almost bringing you back, though, when you're down 3 scores with 8 minutes left. Like, it was never in doubt. So he started rising to the occasion as soon as it was over. It's like
Yeah,
everyone
and I
showed up to
think
the party and brought snacks and like, oh, do you need anything? Like, no, we already got it covered. You're fucking 3 hours late. What are you talking about?
yeah, that's a good analogy. Good thing also with how bad the Cowboys have been in the red zone. I don't think the Falcons care if they put up yards because they know as soon as they get to their 20-yard line that Dak Prescott's just going to throw it to the other team. So I don't think they're that worried.
AJ Terrell, Munch, Jesse Bates, three
Munch.
turnovers in this game, maybe.
Yeah, start the Falcons, Steve. Uh, let's go to the next game here. We got Buffalo at home taking on the Miami Dolphins. Tua's second game back. Buffalo is favored at -6 at home with the over-under of 48.5. This is an interesting game. I do think it's going to be closer than the spread. What can Tua do now that he's getting back into rhythm? Typically, these games are relatively close in the regular season. So I think the spread is actually going to favor the Dolphins. I think this is going to be closer than we think. But Buffalo, I think they're the better team. Josh Allen playing clean football. If he can continue doing that, I think Buffalo should take care of business here. I'll take them winning 27-24.
Yeah, and I think Miami's defense just isn't as good as it has been the past few years. So I think, you know, when you lose to the Cardinals in the fashion that you did, at home versus Kyler Murray. I think playing up against the Bills and Josh Allen is going to be a problem with you. They've kind of been on a roll recently, and I don't really see a reason why you're going to get in their way. And it is a divisional game. It's been close the past few years, but this isn't really the same Miami team. I think Tua will still struggle a little bit in this game, so I could see the Bills winning by 10 versus the Dolphins in this one. I could see like 34 to 24.
Yeah, I definitely think Buffalo pulls it out though. Then we have Vegas going to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Bengals did fall to the Eagles last week and looking to just string some wins together and get back in the playoff position. They're favored by a touchdown over under a 46 and a half. Last 3 weeks, their offense has been sputtering a little bit. I think they turn things around against the Raiders, who their defense has been cupcakes and orange juice at this point. It's been not very good. I think we'll start to see Joe Burrow get back into rhythm, Jamar Chase, and I think they should be able to run the ball against this Raiders team too. So I like the Bengals to cover the spread and get back into rhythm on offense.
Yeah, this game for the Bengals, it's just like, just do the discussion board and you'll get the points. Like, just do it. It's not hard. You just be like, I agree with you because of this, and I agree with you because of this. Boom, you did it, you're done, and you escape with a W. That's all you have to do to beat this Raiders team. Can we do that? Or are you just not going to show up and be like, well, I could do it later? Like, no, do it now.
Just do it now. Just get on the rhythm, Matt. That's a good analogy too. Those stupid ass discussion boards. Let's talk about the Chargers and Browns, two cursed franchises going head to head in Cleveland. Chargers are favored at 1.5, over under of 42.5. My takeaway from this game is I think the spread is baked into how bad the Browns have been, but not what how good they are now with Jameis Winston Churchill at the helm. I think the Browns are going to upset the Chargers here. We're going to see a big game from Jameis Winston, potentially a big game from Derwin James too. I think maybe sees an interception go his way, but overall, I think Jameis Winston has given them a certain bit of energy. There's not as much tape on him this year either with the new Kevin Stefanski system. So I'm going to take the Browns to upset the Chargers here. I do think they start to rattle off some wins. And I think we see Nick Chubb start to get back into somewhat of his form here. So I like Cleveland. I also think the over under, I would take the under personally. I think 23 to 17 is the game I'm seeing here.
Yeah, and I think the Browns defense, like, you saw them come alive, and we always talk about how bad quarterback play will discourage a pass rush. Well, it seemed like the pass rush, like, actually understood that there was going to be an offensive unit on the field that would go out there and put up points and allow them to, you know, not have to worry about holding the Ravens to 20. They're like, we can hold them to 24. Worst case scenario, Jameis probably gets us like 21 with Cleveland this year because say what you will about him with the turnovers, Jameis Winston puts up points and his wide receivers eat. And how often will the Chargers be able to take advantage of those turnovers? It's not really a high flying offense. It's still a little bit of grinded out. There's not too many big plays, even though Lad McConkey got loose, but you're going up against Denzel Ward, who's been one of the best corners in the league this year. So I do like Cleveland as well in this game. Give me the Browns on a little two game feel good streak.
Yeah, we'd love to see it. Then we have maybe the stinker of the week, although there is one more game in contention here at the 1 o'clock slate. New England at Tennessee.
Oh, God.
Tennessee is favored at 3.5, over under of 37.5, which, by the way, is the lowest over under of the week, in case you were wondering. We get potentially Jacoby Brissett versus potentially Mason Rudolph in this game. Should see Drake May come back. He is concussed currently, so we'll see if he makes his return. Will Levis was limited at practice this week as well. Maybe we see the return of Mayo Boy, but this game, I mean, 16 to
um,
14.
do you have any good movies to recommend for Titans or Patriots fans this week?
Uh,
So they don't have to watch this because this is
yeah.
even if you're a
He,
Patriots or Titans fans, like this, don't watch it. Just
this is
don't
the
watch
battle
it.
of the number one overall pick. I would say like better things to watch would be like the Human Centipede, Live Leak, um, Two Girls, One Cup. Those are things that might be more entertaining than watching this. This is going to be ultimately whoever wins this game. I think honestly the Patriots should want to lose this game because the Titans have one win. Give them 2 wins. They have the tiebreaker. If you're looking for that number one overall pick, then just let the Titans win this game. So I guess in that case, I'll put the Titans to win. Plus, they have better offensive talent. So I'll take the Titans to edge it out. But, like, am I going to watch this game? Hell no. Every time I see this on Red Zone, I'm going to scream at Scott Hansen at the top of my lungs and piss off my neighbors.
Yeah. I have better things to do, like sticking my hand in hot frying oil. So I will not be attending this game or watching
Yeah,
it.
well, that sounds good to me. A game
No,
that could be fun to watch, potentially. How about Washington and New York? Washington favored it at 44.5 spread. We like seeing bad things happen to New York teams, just like we're going to see the Jets lose to the Texans this week, just like we're going to see the Yankees lose in the World Series. How about watching the Giants put up 10 points against the Commanders and the Commanders putting up 30? That's something that I could watch any day of the week. Jaden Daniels ascending. Give me the Commanders, obviously, in this game, and watching Daniel Jones potentially get benched. We might actually see the Italian man himself return, Mr. Tommy DeVito himself. Maybe we make an appearance, and maybe then there's hope for the Giants. But otherwise, Commanders cruise.
I hope so because Brian Dayball is slowly turning in that Joe Pesci from Home Alone, and Daniel Jones is the other wet bandit here. I forget the actor who plays him here, but Marv, like that's who Daniel Jones is at quarterback. He's a mix between Marv, Jim Carrey, and Walt Jr. And you had a good idea to break into the house, but sometimes you just can't execute on those ideas. The defense plays well, but when it comes down to it, you're still relying on Daniel Jones. And at the end of the day, I think this will be a closer game because the Giants defense has played well and they've been a good unit. And I don't think they'll fall apart until after Thanksgiving on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the Commanders will struggle a little bit offensively in this game, but at the end of the day, still think they get it done. Sweep the Giants and go 2-0. I'll go 21-13 Commanders in this game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. How about another stinker game? Let's make our moods even worse. I'd like to know if this game is worse than the other one we mentioned here. How about the Saints at Carolina? Saints are favored at 7.5, over under of 43.5. I don't think the question is whether or not the Panthers win this game. I think this is obviously a game that the Saints should win. Hell, even if they had the Pop Warner team, I think they should probably beat this Panthers team. Bryce Young, maybe he throws forward this game. Going to be what we ask in this game, but over under a 43.5, I feel like the under should be like 20, maybe 10-7 is a game we see here, 13-6, maybe. That's what I see in the future for this game as a potential stinker of the week.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was going to talk about this game and watch it when it came on Red Zone, but I'm going to be busy crawling into a hill of fire ants. So
And I'll be sticking
that's a
fork through toasters and swimming with dishwashers and whatnot.
if
So
it was
yeah, I
between like
think this
having to
game,
go to this game and licking an outlet, it would be a tough choice.
yeah, it would be a tough game. This is $18. Why is this game $18? Why isn't that them giving me $20 to watch this game?
Yeah, it should be free. You should
This
get
should be
merch
free.
if you go to this game. Like you should get something, an item at the merch stand. Doesn't have to be a
Worst game of the
jersey, but
week.
how
How
about a hat that
about a
says
hat? I
both these
survived
teams
the worst
suck?
game. I survived the worst game of the year.
Yeah.
All right. 1 o'clock game, last one of the week. We have Broncos at Baltimore. Baltimore is favored at 9.5. Looks like that's the biggest spread of the week currently, actually. Over under a 46.5. How do we feel about Broncos potentially upsetting the Ravens?
I don't see them upsetting them, but I definitely see them covering the spread there. I think Ravens just had a tough divisional game with Cleveland. They'll have something to prove, and I think the Ravens will win by a touchdown, but I think they'll take the brakes off the gas enough where we could see like a Cowboys or a Chargers type effort where the Ravens allowed them to come back and the Denver Broncos were able to make it look close versus the Chargers. So I don't think this is going to be a steamroll by any means, but I think 9 points is a little bit too much, especially Bo Nix performing very well in October. Um, playing very clean football, and Denver's defense has been pretty good here. So I think 9 points is too much, but I can see Denver covering the spread and Baltimore still winning.
Yeah, I think Baltimore wins. I'll take them to cover the spread though. I think Broncos will cover. Then we have the revenge game for Doug Peterson. He goes back to Philly to take on the Eagles. Eagles are favorited at 7.5, over under a 45.5. And I just have something in my stomach in this game. Something is telling me that the Jaguars are going to upset them. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Doug Peterson. I don't know if it's the Jags the last couple of weeks. It seems like they're starting to mesh things together. They beat the Patriots and they had a good game against the Packers. Something tells me that they're due for a win here. And I think the Eagles are also due for a loss. Give me the Jags, just a sneaking suspicion. I think that they're going to cover the spread here and beat the Eagles in surprising fashion. Maybe similar to last game, maybe it's a 30-27 type game.
Yeah, it could be a 30 to 27 type game. I'll still go with the Eagles in this game. I like where you're headed, and I could definitely see it being a competitive game. I think 7 points is way too much for that spread here. But I do think that with AJ Brown and Saquon Barkley, this is still a game in Philadelphia that the Eagles should go out there and win. And I trust Jalen Hurts a little bit more than Trevor Lawrence just because of his athletic ability at this point. But yeah, can I see it being a close game where it's like 27 to 24 type deal? Absolutely. But I just think the Jaguars are still in over their skis a little bit too much versus the Eagles at this point. But if this is a hey, rally around coach moment, this could be a game that turns the Jaguar season entirely around if they go out there and upset Philadelphia with a 7 point spread. So I like where your head's at with that pick.
Thank you. Next game, we have Caleb Williams and the Bears going to Arizona. Spread Cardinals are favored at a 1.5 at home. One thing that I would keep in mind in this game, Caleb Williams went to USC. USC is 5 hours away from Arizona, and this ticket is the highest I've ever seen a Cardinals ticket this season. It's tickets as low as $140. Keep in
What?
mind, yeah, that we've seen $14, we've seen $12, we've seen $20. So this gives me the idea that the USC fans, when these tickets came out, went and purchased this game ahead of time to see Caleb Williams. So we're going to see a lot of USC fans in this game. We're going to see a lot of Bears fans. And we're going to see a lack of Cardinals fans in this game. So this is really a home game for Chicago. Chicago just came off of a loss that Tyreek Stevenson was bound to have gotten chewed out by Matt Eberflus with that horrible last second play, which they should have won that game. I think Chicago bounces back. They bring the Cardinals back down to earth. Cardinals already, as it is, struggle to move the ball offensively during spurts during the season. So I think that happens again in this game. I'll take the Bears to cover, and I think they win. I'll say like 27-13 is an appropriate game.
Yeah, I think the Bears definitely win this game because they have a good defense and they'll definitely be able to slow down the Commanders. And I think they'll be able to put up points. I mean, Tua, off of the fuzzy treatment after his concussion versus the Buffalo Bills, came back and looked pretty good, but they were able to put up points. And I think the Bears' offense with D Swift coming alive the past few weeks, having Cole Komet there, who had a little bit of an off game. DJ Moore is going to be itching to get involved again. And you really didn't have a big offensive game versus the Commanders. So I think this is a team that could have a offensive explosion and kind of make up for what they lost out. But I think it'll be a shootout and the Bears inevitably win it just because they get a stop at the end. But I think the Bears win this game. I'll go pretty high scoring. I'll go 31 to 23 versus Arizona.
Yeah, I think home field advantage. Caleb Williams plays one of his better games this season for sure. Then we have game of the week, arguably. I think this is going to be great. We got Lions at Green Bay. They're favored at 3.5, over under of 48.5. If this was 10 years ago, we would say the Packers own the Lions, but we've seen the last several years, whether it's knocking Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs a couple of years back, or whether it's what we saw last year with them in the Packers. I think we're bound to have a great game similar to the Vikings game, but early sentiment, Vikings and Lions, who do you swing one way or another?
Yeah, so the Vikings and Lions, it's definitely an interesting matchup. And if you pick the Packers in this game, I'm not going to fault you. My thing with the Packers is you go out there, you have a close shootout versus the Jaguars, and then You've won some games with a blowout, but Jordan Love kind of gets banged up in this one. Malik Willis has been there for you, but the Lions just seem like they're on a different level so far than every other NFL team. And I can see this being a close game. I don't think the Packers get blown out, but I think Jared Goff is playing so far out of his mind that those interceptions from Jordan Love can't happen. Malik Willis having an off game if he does in this game and ends up having to play. I know Jordan Love is still day to day with his groin injury, so we don't know who's going to play yet. But I just think either way, like those turnovers are going to matter, and just the duo of Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery carrying you, along with Jared Goff having like 15 passes and you score 52 points. Like, how does that math add up? Trying to figure out how the Lions even got 52 points. They're just on a different level right now. Then I could see the Packers beating them the second time, but I think the Lions go out there, beat them the first time. They're on an absolute mission so far this season, and I think that continues in Green Bay. They just have a lot more momentum coming into this game, where the Packers season got a little bit nervous again seeing Jordan Love get hurt. So I think if he's playing with the injury or it's Malik Willis, the Lions just have the upper hand right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially with how good their secondary has been, whether it's the Brian Branches of the world or Carlton Davis, who's been a great addition for them. Like, I think their secondary has been great, and ultimately they've been able to stop the run too. So Josh Jacobs maybe doesn't have the game he had last week. So I think the Lions to win this game. I think it will be close, but ultimately I see 31-26 type game potentially for them. Ultimately playing cleaner football. Jared Goff has like an 88% completion rating the last month, so I think that continues here. Then we go to the NFC West matchup. We have the Rams taking on the Seahawks in the last of our 4 o'clock slate. Rams are favorited at 1.5 with the over under of 48.5. Thoughts on this game here?
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks got broken last week. The Bills went out there, absolutely wagging them, and this is going to be a tough matchup for Seattle, especially in division here versus Sean McVay. I just think Sean McVay is going to eat Mike McDonald alive when it comes to this coaching matchup. And then Geno Smith seemingly getting broken last week. I just have no confidence in the Seattle Seahawks team anymore. You look good coming out. It was nice. You went 3-0. Still had questions because I've seen this team start hot before. It was the same year Denver started out hot. It was the same year Carolina started out hot, and all of those teams were 3-0. And Seattle has fallen off, but the Rams just got their two dynamic receivers back. It's going to change the whole dynamic of the team, and I just don't think the Seahawks are on the same level right now. And going to be a divisional game, and the Seahawks beat them, and I look stupid, sure, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
No, I also think the Rams are starting to pass everyone else in that division. I have the Cardinals losing this week. I have the Seahawks losing this week and the 49ers. Let's see what the bye week does to them. But I think the Rams are starting to ascend at the right time. So I'll take the same with the Rams. I just don't know see how the Seahawks can cover Puka Nakoa, Cooper Cup, and even Kyron Williams as well. I think the Rams are just a better team. They have more momentum and a better quarterback. So I'll take the Rams to win as well. Then Sunday Night Football, we have Joe Flacco taking on Sam Darnold and the Vikings. Vikings have lost the last 2 games, but against worthy opponents. Vikings are favored at 5 at home, over under of 46.5. Is this a game where you see the Vikings getting back on track after starting off so hot? Or maybe some Joe Flacco magic potentially?
No, I just see Jonathan Taylor being the piece that flips this whole game around on its head here, because the Lions were able to have success versus the Vikings, where how many total yards did Jameer Gibbs have? 150 versus Minnesota. Where if you look at a player like Jonathan Taylor, who's going to be able to expose you like that, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, with Flacco, it's like I think it'll be a close competitive game, and it is a toss up. It is a pick 'em either way. But right now, I just like the Colts better. Like when you say Colts Vikings, instantly I go, I think the Colts are better right now. I think their offensive unit as a whole is a little bit more well rounded, where we're getting Downs involved, where Jordan Addison, free him. I don't know where he is. He's been locked up. he even made a post about how he needs to get the ball. It's like free Jordan Addison. They haven't been able to do that. And then you're getting Hawkinson back soon here, but it's really just been Justin Jefferson and then Aaron Jones. But I just don't think when I see Sam Darnold and Joe Flacco, I can see Sam Darnold overcoming Joe Flacco in that matchup here. And I just think his veteran experience on a Sunday night matchup where it's the spotlight is on you. I just can't see Sam Darnold thriving in that environment here.
Hmm, that's a good point. Initially, I was going to go Vikings, but you did mention that primetime thing, so I think that does change the narrative. We've seen Sam Darnold on primetime this year. I think last game he didn't play necessarily poorly, but you could tell who was the better quarterback. And Joe Flacco, like if I'm putting Kirk Cousins in the Hall of Fame, I'm also putting Joe Flacco in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, the Colts, we've seen the backup quarterback trend where they start and they make noise. We saw Andy Dalton do that for the Panthers this year already, and Joe Flacco is like the epitome of great backup quarterback. So I think that alone should be enough for the Colts to get the edge. This game is going to be close, so I wouldn't touch that spread. Whether you think the Vikings are going to win or the Colts, I think this is going to ultimately come down to a field goal. Whoever kicks it, it ultimately depends. Matt Gay, I think for me, gives me the edge. So right now, I'm going to have the Colts edging it out, but I do think this is going to be a really close game. Tough game overall. I see like a 24-21 type game. And right now, the Colts just have the slight edge just because they got Joe Flacco on the other end. They got Jonathan Taylor and those weapons that have been begging to get attention now that they have a quarterback that can throw it to them.
Yeah, and I think the Colts will pop off. And Anthony Richardson on Sunday Night Football would have been ugly, and I think Shane Steichen was saving him from that. To be honest, with this benching.
Yeah, me too. Last game of the week to cover, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the undefeated Chiefs at Arrowhead. Chiefs are favored at -9, over under of 45.5. At this point, like, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs unless if Patrick Mahomes loses his head, arm, leg, whatever it is. So, like, as lame as it is just picking the Chiefs every week, I'm just going to pick them until they lose. Well, I think the Bucks can make some noise and maybe cut into that spread a little bit. I just think the Chiefs are playing a different game. They have D Hop. They just got Josh Uche as well. They're going in all in this season for that three-peat. So I'm going to take them, especially with the Bucks being banged up. Give me the Chiefs to win this game, but I do think they win by a touchdown. I'll have them winning 24-17.
Yeah, 24-17 is a good score. I'll go 28 to 17 in this game. I think they do dominate throughout most of it, and Patrick Mahomes on prime time does turn it up a little bit here. And then just going up against this Chiefs defense, not a great matchup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Sure, against a team like the Falcons still finding themselves, you can just have Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Kate Otten. But going up against a team like the Chiefs, they're going to be able to harness in on your weekends weaknesses and Baker Mayfield's turnovers that he's been having the past few weeks, and he has been having a lot of them recently. Just not going to fly on Monday Night Football versus Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's boring to say. A lot of people don't like the Chiefs this year, but they're just the best team in the league, and you can't argue it at this point.
No, you can't. Last two teams to cover, bye weeks. Steelers and 49ers have the week off. How do they fare against the bye week? Steelers, I don't think the bye week can stop that defense. I don't like that offensive line. I think the Steelers are going to have a fine bye week. The 49ers, I'm worried. The bye week has hands at this point. Can George Kittle survive the bye week? Can Brendan Ayuk recover? I mean, he's already out for the season. I guess he's done for. But Christian McCaffrey, can he get his legs back from the bye week? Maybe. How do you think the bye week goes for these two teams?
Yeah, for the Steelers, I think it goes really well. I think it's a good game plan for Mike Tomlin. I think people doubt Mike Tomlin coming into the bye week, but at the end, he figures it out, and the media's like, "Oh yeah, that's why Mike Tomlin gets paid a lot more than I do, to be a head coach and talk about football, be a student of the game week in and week out." So I think Mike Tomlin, gets some flack, but ends up figuring it out going into the bye week. And then the 49ers, like, just another week spent in the ER. Like, are you gonna go on vacation? Or are you just gonna get stuck in the hospital again? And I think, yeah, the band aid there, um, that looks like two dicks touching. That's basically gonna be the 49ers.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. We'll see how the bye week handles them this week. But let's see, what did we do today? We gave all our grades for every single team around the NFL for this first half of the season. Did the playoff picture. We previewed every game, gave our betting odds favorites, where we think each team is going to land this week. But the most important thing that we have yet to talk about, the fans in the comment section, they're saying, who is the best teams in the NFL? We don't know. We know what happened last week, but we need these documents to be unsealed. We need these documents to be presented. So, without further ado, to end the show, how about the top 5 best teams according to the Brickyard so that our fans can go home happy knowing who are the 5 greatest teams entering week 9?
Yeah, the five best teams entering week 9 are going to be some shocking teams, some surprising teams. We finally have some new teams on the list. Some honorable mentions. The Commanders. You played a good game versus the Bears, but you squeaked out there with a little bit of luck. I can't put you on the top 5 yet. The Bears, since you lost that game, you've been exited from the top 5. And then also a team that could potentially enter into the top 5 depending on what happens in the next few weeks. The Eagles, you're on the bubble right now. Also, the Buffalo Bills. If the Buffalo Bills go out there and beat the Chiefs, potentially you could see yourself added to the top 5. But at number 5 is a team that's been written off this year, a team that's looked dead in the water at points, but is a team I still had my eyes on, one of my dark horse Super Bowl teams, one of my dark horse teams to come out here and win their division this year and make a deep push in the playoffs. Just got their 2 best players back, even though they're not at the top of the division. I mean, the 5th best team has to be the Rams, right? You've got two. You have a Super Bowl winning head coach. You have Matthew Stafford. Now you have Nakua and Cooper Cup spawning back on your team in the same exact week. Like, okay, let's let them forget about who we are and then come back. And the games you lost haven't been that egregious. You just haven't had that many wide receivers for Matthew Stafford. And Matthew Stafford has been dealing with 2 major injuries, and that is the 2 best players on offense. And your defense has been just good enough for the Rams here, where if you get that high powered, flying Sean McVay led offense back, like people forget who Stafford is. People forget who Sean McVay is as a head coach when he has a fully loaded offense. And they are back, and they're coming to be the best team in their division this year as the 49ers and the Cardinals start to continue to fall apart here, along with the Seattle Seahawks. At number 4, well, this team was at number 3 for a little bit, but then you go out there, you go to the dog pound, and you lose. And I counted 8 interceptions that the Browns should have had versus the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And you go to Cleveland, lose that game, and it was a game that Cleveland seemingly had control of through most of the game with Jameis Winston. This was a team that, with Deshaun Watson, had played well and had some close games. They could have won without him, but this is still a team that you want to secure your division. You're in a dog fight with Pittsburgh. It's just a game you can't drop. Every game is going to matter when it comes down to the AFC North. So can I have you in the top 3 right now? No, but I'm still going to put you at top 4 because you go out there, get Deontay Johnson, have Derrick Henry on this team, have a legitimate trio. Mark Andrews is coming along. Hasn't really been the same pass rush where you've been able to get pressure, but your secondary has played well. So at number 4, the Baltimore Ravens taking a step back this week, but by no means is this a negative for them. I think they'll only recover and try and push back into the top 3 teams in the league this week. So Baltimore Ravens at number 4, taking a step back, and then taking a step forward in the top 5, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, Jordan Love goes down, doesn't matter because we got this guy named Josh Jacobs who goes for 25 rushes, over 125 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Malik Willis steps in and goes 4 for 5 with 56 yards passing here. And then, most of our receivers only had 3, 4 catches. Doesn't matter. Tucker Kraft was going off on National Tight Ends Day. And this is a team that came back versus the Texans with Jordan Love here. Jordan Love has been one of the best quarterbacks at just getting the ball in the end zone, which is frankly your damn job as an NFL quarterback, is just getting the ball in the end zone here. So at number 3, it's the Green Bay Packers. I truly believe this is one of the 3 best teams in the league here when you look at all of the variety that they can do on offense and how well their defense has played and situationally how well they've been coached by Matt LaFleur, you can't say enough by how much of a complete unit this team is as winning being one of the youngest teams to win a playoff game in NFL history. I mean, this was basically the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA last year, and they're going to get better again. So I have the Thunder, not the Thunder, the Packers at number 3 here. At number 2, it is a absolute wagon of a team that just went out there and scored 52 points, made it look like it was nothing because we only threw the ball 15 times. Jared Goff is playing out of his mind, and week in and week out, they've been pinned to number 2 here. People thought I was crazy when I put them at number 2 earlier this season. Like they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How are the Lions in the top 5? How are they not number 1 yet? Really, because the Chiefs are just that much of a generational team. But the Lions have been doing it on special teams. Their defense, even without Hayden Hutchinson, has still been better where their secondary is coming along. And then their offense can just score anytime they want to. And I believe that they have the best playbook of any offense in the NFL right now. And when Jared Goff is playing at an MVP level, he's having his best season right now. And Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery, it's not even close to the next running back duo after them. They've been elite in touchdowns and yardages, not just as a duo, but individually. And then you're putting them together and then having players like Brock Wright step up, Khalif Raymond come out of nowhere, averaged like fifth. He had over 180 kick return yards in a game. Absolutely insane stuff here from the Detroit Lions. And I think they're a team that only more injuries can get in their way to them getting to the Super Bowl this year because if they're going to do it any year, it's going to be this year, especially in a weaker NFC when their only real challenges is a division rival. And at number 1, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, enough said there. They're on their way to a three-peat. They're the only undefeated team in the league this year. Their defense is fantastic, and they're still always trying to get better. They are not staying complacent. They're going out there, getting DeAndre Hopkins, getting linebackers from the Patriots, absolutely finessing them to fortify that already spectacular defense. And now you're going to wake up one day and Hollywood Brown is going to potentially come back for the playoffs. Like, this is a dangerous team this year. And the fact that people are sleeping on them makes them even more dangerous going into the playoffs. Like, people said we are the worst undefeated team in the league. People are trashing Patrick Mahomes, saying you could actually argue he's in the bottom 25 quarterback. Like, shut the fuck up. No, the Chiefs are the best team in the league. No team would rather have any other quarterback besides Patrick Mahomes. And if they tell you that, they're lying not to hurt Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen's feelings. Like, sorry, every other team in the league, like, hey, if do you want Patrick Mahomes? Yes. No one's gonna be like, actually, this season, if you look at it, technically, Baker Mayfield is better than Mahomes. No, that's not how the NFL works.
No, I agree. And that's why Patrick Mahomes, I think especially the second half is really going to start to look like old Patrick Mahomes. The fact that they're 7-0 with him not playing his best football is indicative on how good that team is, how rounded they are. But we now know who is the top 5 best teams according to the Brickyard. We know how each team stacks up via grades, via this week, via the bye week, whatever it might be. We're up to speed now on everything NFL. Make sure to tune into us next Tuesday and Wednesday as we recap and preview next week's games. Message most important to all watching here today: stay brick.
Stay brick.
Beautiful.
Fuck yeah, 2.5 hours and it flew by. Oh no, we're going
Oh,
live.
oh, we're going live again.